how many of you were alive when President Kennedy was murdered? Okay. All right. How many of you are under 20? Okay. Yeah, I know you are.
I told you.
I know it.
She also worked for the Warren Commission, by the way.
She sat on the commission, didn't she?
Yeah.
She was the only female at that time on the commission.
Female at that time was a very young one.
You know, therein lies the problem. We had no females on the Warren Commission.
That's right. That's right.
Well, I tell you, you talk about an organization that was sexist. Jeez. Okay. How many of you are some of my former students? Okay. All right. Good. I got to kind of a feel about who I'm talking to and where I'm talking. I'm not going to ask you if you're Republican or Democrat because I know that we are in a Republican state, so there's no problem with that. I will tell you this, for those of you who don't know, I am Casey Quinlan, and I have been researching the murder of President Kennedy for over 50 years. Okay. Taught high school for 40 years and found a way to bring this into my classes and developed programs that we would go to Dallas and do an oral history with my students. And some of those students that are here today were on some of those trips. And I do want to point out a couple of those students, at least right now, who have helped me put this program together. And Devin Hazel, right here, Devin, with his son Logan, and he's helped me put some things together over the years. And then I definitely want to point out David Knight. David Knight's one of my former students, and David's been doing this for 29 years, and you've probably been doing it probably 30 plus, whatever. And David is the videographer for JFK Lancer, which is a national program, and that particular program every year has met for probably the past 21, 22 years, and he's the videographer for that organization. It's a national organization, and I'm fortunate enough to be one of the lecturers down there for the past 15 years. How I got to that stature, if you want to call it a stature, is as a teacher, when I would bring this material into the classrooms, I would synthesize it and I'd put it to my students as best I possibly could without giving my opinion. And I had a lot of students at the end would sit back and say, well, what is your opinion? I go, well, that's my opinion. I said, but what's yours? What have you learned? And Devin, I think, I'm going to brag on you a little bit. You went out and read, I think, 10 books in about 2 years at the high school level, which is pretty tough for any young man or any young woman just to sit down and read some of the books that he read. Well, he read a book, and I gave him a transcript, about a 400-page transcript that hadn't been published yet. And I got it from Peter Dale Scott, Professor Scott, out of University of California, Berkeley. And it cost me about $150 to get that transcript. And I had read it about 4 or 5 times. And Devin was real interested in it, so I said, take this. You go through it, and anything you don't understand, you write down and then define it. Well, 26 pages later, he brought it to me, and I said, you've got to be kidding me. He said, well, you wanted me to write it down. So we ended up kind of publishing that and bringing it down to the conferences to use that as an excerpt to this particular book that has never been published. But it's online now, and there's a lot of stuff that is online right now that if you get access to and read. How many of you are online right now and looking at some of the material out there? Okay. All right. How many of you have read this book right here? How many of you have read this book? Anybody read this book? Isn't that amazing? When I get out in public, this is the Warren Report, okay? I have to have read this. I have to know what's in here. Well, this is a supplement. It's a supplement of the real Warren Report, which is 888 pages long. But this is kind of the Cliff Notes back in the day. This is the Cliff Notes of the Warren Report, which is 888 pages, and then you have the Warren Commission documents, which are 26 volumes of information that, in some of the books inside the Warren Commission documents, on each page you have actually 4 pages. So at the time I was using magnifying glasses to read that stuff. And the bad part about it is I only read half of the books. Now, my buddy, whom I've worked with, Brian Edwards, for probably the past 30, 35 years, he read all of them. And he'll swear up and down, he says it's the most boring thing he's ever read. I said, well, have you read the Constitution? How many of you have read the Constitution? Here we go. You know, I have to do that because as a teacher, I got to figure out where I'm at. Because I deal with people on a daily basis that swear to God that this is the way our government should be, this is the way it should be, and I go, you know, you need to read the Constitution. And here's the thing about the Constitution. If you understand the Constitution, the government's going to shut down every year about this time. It's mandated. It's going to shut down unless we pass a bill or a law that it's going to. But then what happens is we tag all these other bills and things on it called riders, and we get nothing done. It's stalemated. And we're not over yet, are we? We're not over yet. So keep that in the back of your mind. To try to get anything done on the Kennedy assassination is hard, extremely hard and difficult. And it was extremely hard and difficult for my first 20 years. I got so upset, I go, you know, I can't get anything. There's nothing out there. Where do I go? I got to go to the National Archives. I can't get in unless somebody signs. I have to get degrees that says I'm a doctor, I'm a PhD, in order to be able to get into Congress so that Congress can sign me a waiver so that I can get into the National Archives. Just to see what's not there. And we found out later, years and years ago, that none of these documents have been released. Okay? And so we have what is known as FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act. And so we as researchers would go through the Freedom of Information Act and apply to get documents released. Well, one of the biggest things going on right now is that this past October there was a number of documents that were released, and President Trump signed those in. He didn't get all of them because the CIA came in and said, no, we can't release these. So those are being held back. Okay? But I can tell you this, what documents and what people like myself have done for the past years, they say there's no smoking gun in these documents. Well, what is in these documents, part of it is that Lee Harvey Oswald was tracked by the CIA, the counterintelligence division of the CIA, James Angleton, and Oswald was James Angleton's, it was his boy. So Oswald is CIA. Oswald's CIA, okay? And believe it or not, I knew that a long time ago, but now we have the documents, and so I usually go to my college professors if they're still alive, and they go, he's CIA. You remember me saying that about 40 years ago? He's CIA, all right? Would that have said? Oswald is CIA. Office of Naval Intelligence, FBI informer, okay? And he was working for all of these people, United States Marine, okay? So when you go back over who Oswald is, you're sitting there going, my God, I thought he was a nobody that got up in the window and shot the president. Oh, no, guys. Hell, he wasn't even on the 6th floor. Yeah, he wasn't even there. But we believe Walter Cronkite, Bill O'Reilly. You know, Bill O'Reilly was standing on the grassy knoll and he was talking about people who were shooting from there at the very beginning of his career. Now he says, no, none of this is real. Go back and read that about Bill O'Reilly, Sean Hannity, all these guys. I'm sitting there going, come on, guys, give us the truth here. Well, the problem today with the truth is that I'm not sure what the truth is anymore. I don't care if you go to CNN, Fox, or even our local news people here. I have no idea what the truth is. I don't believe any of them anymore. I got to see it for myself. And I feel like I'm a doubting Thomas. Well, that's my Catholic name. Casey Joseph Thomas Quinlan. I took that name. I probably should have taken St. Thomas Aquinas. I would have probably been better off, but I took St. Thomas the Apostle, which basically, he doubted everything until he actually saw Christ. And so that's perfect for me, because I question everything. And since I started doing that, then what has happened is I keep going on and on. When we hit the 50th anniversary, my wife says, well, are you done? I said, honey, they're just opening up a whole bunch of brand new documents. I'm just starting again, okay? And so that's where we're at. We're opening up these documents, but let's go back just a little bit. Let's just go back to 1992. JFK Act. JFK Act came out because of Oliver Stone's movie, JFK. Because he put that movie out, and because there was such an explosion about what may have taken place down there, and in fact, I remember, let me see, President Bush gets on mainstream TV at main time, probably about 7 o'clock in the evening, and he cut in, and he says, I don't want anybody to watch this movie. You should not watch this movie. This man does not know what he's talking about, and he's really cutting down the United States when he does that. And I sat back and I go, damn, I hope everybody watches it now, because that's a great advertisement for that. Well, the problem with that is that when they released those documents, they told us it was 6 million documents. There was 4 million documents that were released. And over the period from 1992 to probably about 2017, we have gone through a lot of those documents. Not all of them, but we've gone through a lot of those. What you're going to see here tonight is the result of my research into those documents and try to show you what happened on the other side of the Warren Report. Let me give you some other information before I actually get into this. I actually want to thank Shawnee Civic Center for giving me the opportunity to come up here and at least talk to you people about this. And I told my wife, I said it's a dead issue. I don't know how many people are going to show up. But again, at the same time, I've been doing this for over 40 years in the classroom. I want to thank my wife Linda and my brother Mick for helping put this together. Let me see. We have sign-up sheets out there, and no, I'm not with the CIA. I am not with the National Security Agency. I am not with the FBI. And I'm not with the Trump administration. I am not with any of these organizations. And I'm not with Russia. There was no collusion there.
No collusion.
No collusion. And I just want to let you know basically that what I'm asking from you is your name, your address, phone number, and your email. And the reason is because I'm going to give another presentation, and the other presentation is probably the most controversial presentation. I gave this several years ago in Dallas, and right away I had college professors come up to me and they go, "You teach what?" And I said, "I teach at the high school level." I said, "High school level?" And they go, "Where?" I said, "In Kansas." "Do you know where that is geographically?" I said, "You know Dorothy, Toto, and the tornadoes, okay?"
Yes, man, Dylan.
There you go. That's right. But I do have sign-up sheets back there, and if you wouldn't mind signing those. And again, questions and answers, I know you're going to have questions. A lot of you have a lot of questions right now. But I guarantee you'll have a lot more questions once I start getting into this. I do want to mention to you that I'm one of the speakers at a national conference coming up here in March. And I was talking to the people in Washington, D.C. last night, and they said, "Would you advertise that?" And I said, "Wait a minute, you're going to pay me to go there, give me a room, buy me an airline ticket, and now you want me to advertise this for you?" I said, "You want my bill?" Well, I'm going to advertise for them because it's one of those things because everybody's trying to figure out what's going on, and I'm going to advertise it, and I'll put it on my website and things like that nature. The next lecture that I'm going to do is probably February 2nd, and I think you have that in a little flyer that we gave out. Now, one of the reasons that I want you to sign up back there is because that can change. It can change, and I want to be able to get information out to you. I'm going to answer a few questions before we get started here, but at the same time, I do want to welcome you guys here and thank you for coming. Is there any questions that anybody has? Let me throw one out and see if you guys know this. There was a Catholic priest that went and gave President Kennedy extreme unction, last rites. Do any of you know who that was? Father Oscar Huber. Well, the question that we usually ask a lot of our students, we used to take students down to Dallas on a bus trip tour down there, and we would show them films and do everything on the way bus because it's about 8 hours down there. And then we would give them a prize, and the prize was probably an extra $25 or $30 that they could spend in Dallas when we were on tour. And they had to answer some questions. And one of the questions we asked was, do you know who the second priest was with Father Huber? And how many of you knew that there was a second priest? Okay. Father James Thompson, who drove Father Huber there and was parking the car, but the FBI wouldn't, or the Secret Service wouldn't let him, and they let Oscar Huber in to give the last rites to President Kennedy. But you wouldn't know, I mean, that's kind of trivia. Here's another little trivia. How much money did JFK have on him when he died? President of the United States.
Russian doesn't carry money.
He had $10,000 on him.
Wow.
John F. Kennedy was one of those people. He pretty rich. Not anything close to the Rockefellers. Okay. But at the same time, John Kennedy knew that wherever he went, he had people who were maitre d's, and they would service him and his wife. Well, they never got paid anything for it. Well, JFK made sure they got paid. He would take $10,000, he'd go to the main maitre d', and he'd give it to them, and he says, you take care of all the waiters and waitresses here. So that's what JFK did with that. Smoldering in JFK's pocket was the cigar that he was smoking on Air Force One, or part of his inside pocket. Okay? And Jackie Kennedy, if you did not know, was a chain smoker. Okay? Now, those are just little trivia things that I come across. Now, there's one other trivia thing when I was doing research for the book that my buddy Brian Abrams and I wrote. And by the way, this is the book that we wrote. And we put it in big print. And the reason we put it in big print is because I'm getting old. And because of two things. I wanted my students to read it. I wanted it to be on a large print page, and I also wanted older people to read it also. And I knew that it would be a little bit easier if it was in 14 to 16 font, for those of you who know what I'm talking about, okay? But when I wrote this book, I learned more about the English language than I ever have. In putting this book out, my buddy looked at me and he says, well, he says, you got two choices. He says, do you want to be on the front cover, or do you want your name first? I said, I want to be on the front cover. So here's what we did. Now, that's not me on the front cover. Now, we go down to Dallas at 7 o'clock in the morning, and I have all my students with me, and I have a rifle with me. Well, it's illegal to have a rifle in the middle of that at the daily class. It's also illegal to have one up there on the 6th floor. But for the most part, my students would say, Mr. Quinlan, what are you going to do with this rifle? I said, well, I want to get a picture. I want to get a picture of myself leaning over the picket fence, and I want to get a good picture of this. So I said, okay, I'm going to hold the rifle over here, and I want you to gather around me in a circle, and let's walk up to the picket fence. So we walk up there, and they said, man, is this legal to do? I said, no. but it's early in the morning, and nobody will know. Okay? And I had a deal of talcum powder, and I gave it to one of the kids, and I said, this is what I want you to do. I want you to get on the other side of the fence, pour some talcum powder in your hands, and when I say, go, pop it up so you have smoke coming up. So it looks like this. Okay? So I'm showing you how Hollywood did this, but this is how Quinlan did this. The only problem is, I got up to the fence. And every one of my students are laughing. And they go, Mr. Quinlan, you're not tall enough. Here's the fence. So I said, all right, Brian, you get the picture, but my name's going on first. True story. So, anyway, one other story that I will tell you. One of our eyewitnesses that came down and talked to our students almost every time that we went down there was Jean Hill. Jean Hill was a teacher at that time, 26-year-old teacher, and she was probably anywhere from 12 to 15 feet away from when the president was shot. Kindergarten teacher, and she, I had met her, we talked to her, and she loved football. She loved Derek Thomas. And in 1991, Derek Thomas was at Borders Bookstore at Metcalf, and she was there to sell her book, and there was a big long line. And Brian, my buddy, he says, "How are we going to get up to the front of the line?" I said, "Watch." We just walked up to the front of the line. I gave Jean a big hug and kiss and everything. But she had been coming down all these years with our students. Jean was followed by the FBI every day, every hour, until she died. Okay? Her entire life. The FBI, because of what she said she saw. Okay? Jean Hill's story, she said she heard 4 to 6 shots up on the grassy knoll. But her story is a little deeper than that. The reporters got in a little deeper and they said, "Did you see anything else?" I said, "Well, yeah. I was close enough to see inside the car." And they go, "What did you see?" And she says, "I saw the red roses that Mrs. Kennedy had." And she said, "I swear to God that she had a French poodle on her lap that jumped off her lap." And so the reporters at that time took her testimony and they blew it clear out of proportion, said, "This woman says that she heard and saw shooters on the grassy knoll and a French poodle on Jackie Kennedy's lap." Jackie Kennedy didn't have a French poodle on her lap, so they made her out to be a liar. Now, about 3 or 4 years before she died, we had access to the pictures of the back seat of the car. And if you've been online and see some of those, they're pretty grotesque. You'll see some of them here, and I just want to let you know some of the pictures you're going to see. They're pretty grotesque. But at the same time, understand this is a murder case. But Jean, once I saw this presentation, and I said, "Oh my God," I said, "What is that in the back seat?" And the guy says, that's a puppet. That's a lamb chops puppet." And I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Have you told Jean Hill that you have this? This is about 750 people. And they go, "No, we're going to bring her in." I said, "Hold on just a minute." So I went out and I got a hold of Jean and gave her a hug and kiss. I said, "Young lady," I said, you're going to be very surprised at what you see." And she goes, "What?" I said, "They're going to show you something in there that you stood your ground all these years and you said, 'This is what I saw.'" Well, what Jean said that she saw was something like this. A little puppet that Jackie Kennedy had underneath her roses. And when the president was being shot at, Jackie scooted across, popped the roses up, and this thing popped up in the air. Do you realize how close you would have to be to see something like this? When she went in, she started crying. Standing ovation for a woman in history, for an eyewitness that never backed down. That's a good lady story, okay? And she never did back down. And like I said, the FBI followed her the rest of her life. They were sitting outside the front. In fact, there were several times where her brake lines were cut. And she went up to the FBI and she goes, "Do you guys happen to know who cut my brake lines?" I'm sure they did. All right. She had a massive heart attack. She had a massive heart attack, and what was unique about that is that my older daughter went with me to Dallas back the year that she died, and we met Ed Hoffman, who's a deaf mute, and he did all the, he didn't do ASL, the American Sign Language, he did the old sign language, and my daughter, one of the reasons I brought her with me is because she could sign, you know, the whole thing. And Ed, we were sitting at a table right in the middle of the conference, and Ed's asking a question and my daughter's interpreting, and my daughter starts crying, and I go, what's going on? And she said, Ed asked where Gene is. And I said, oh my God, he doesn't know. And she's crying. She goes, what do I do, Dad? And I said, you need to tell him. And then she told him, and he started crying. I started crying, and I'm going, oh my God, what's going on here? Well, that's how close people will get. And these are just ordinary, everyday people that saw something that was extraordinary. And they stuck by their guns, and they said, this is what they saw and heard. And that has been questioned over and over again for the last 54 years. Okay? Now, most of us will believe certain things. If we see stuff coming out of the National Archives, it's a little better for us to believe those things. But when you actually hear it from eyewitnesses and the sincerity that they have, it's kind of like, you know, how can you not believe these people? And in fact, once Jean Hill came out, and she was crying, she goes, oh my God, she goes, they actually have proof that there was. I said, not a French poodle. She goes, I know now, but she says, it jumped off the lap. About 15, 12 feet away. I gave this presentation last November in Dallas to a pretty good crowded room. And I think one of the reasons that I decided to do a lot of this is because I got kind of tired of looking at all of the different types of programs that were put on at the national level, and I saw all these people who were very famous people who I've read books on, but they couldn't get up in front of people and talk, and they couldn't put programs together. So I said, you know, I'm a teacher. This is what I do for a living. So Brian Edwards and myself started putting programs together. The very first program we put together, we just blew these people away, standing ovation and everything. And I said, see, Brian, we can do this at the national level. There's no big thing about it, but there is. When you get up in front of the national TV and stuff like that, or national level, you're in front of your peers. Well, I'm in front of my peers here. All right, guys, the name of my program is Project JFK, on the right side of history, new revelations in the JFK assassination and the forces behind his death. Obviously, I'm Casey Quinlan, and you already met me. Here we go, Grave Injustice. Fabricating the autopsy of President Kennedy and institutionalizing its cover-up. The Bethesda Charade and Autopsy Shuffle. 54 years of disconnection. Official lies versus the hidden truth. Now, I do want to warn you, you're going to see bits and pieces of this autopsy up here. And if you've never seen it before, it's pretty grotesque. I was a medic in the Vietnam era war, and I was one of the guys that could sit through an autopsy and eat a sandwich. Kind of an iron core gut, if you would. And I didn't mind doing that. But at the same time, you're going to see some things up here, so I just want to prepare you for it. Okay, I'm Casey Quinlan, and I guess my big claim to fame is this picture is worth about $10,000, $20,000 right now. It's a picture of me with Governor Conley and Mrs. Conley. And this was taken 29 years to the day after the fact. And he happened to be down there that day, and a guy by the name of Mark Taylor, a guy that I taught with for years, and my other colleague, Brian Edwards, we were sitting in one of the rib places and eating in Dallas about a half mile to 3/4 of a mile away from Dealey Plaza, and somebody comes in, it's 96 degrees, and somebody says, Governor Conley's in Dealey Plaza. Well, we don't know whether to believe him or not, so I said, hold our meals. I said, let's go, let's take out. Well, Brian didn't believe it, and I said, you know, this is not Kansas City, this is Dallas, maybe he's down there. So we run down there, and we don't see anybody. It's a beautiful, bright, sunshiny day out. And we turn the corner, and all of a sudden we see this black limousine, and there's the governor on top of the picket fence line looking over into the railroad yard. So I looked at him, and I'm going. So my buddy looks at me, and he goes, how are you going to get him to take a picture? And I said, I'll just walk up to him. So I did, and I said, Governor Conley, my name's Casey Quinlan. I'm a teacher in the Olathe School District. I said, is there any way that we can get a picture? Well, he kind of looked at me and kind of frowned a little bit. And his wife comes in with a big old southern accent. She goes, why, Shell, honey? So she goes, where would you like to get a picture? And I said, well, come on down. right in front of the grassy knoll, railroad tower in the background, and you can't see the bottom half of the picture, but where the bullet mark is on the sidewalk. So I caught everything in the background, and this is a pretty historic picture. But anyway, Brian gets upset when he sees this picture. And Mark Taylor, who took the picture, I said, can we get a picture with Mark? Mark says, no, we didn't have cell phones at that time. Okay? He goes, I ran out of film. I said, sorry, Mark. Brian Enders and I wrote the book, Beyond the Fence Line. Beyond the Fence Line is the eyewitness account of Ed Hoffman in the murder of President Kennedy. What is so unique about this is that Ed Hoffman is a deaf mute. And we had to have people interpret for us. The purpose of this presentation is to provide sensible and intelligent answers of who participated in the immediate cover-up of the murder of President Kennedy and why. It will clarify and interpret some of the newly released information from the JFK Act, the Assassination Records and Review Board, and the Air Force One audio tapes recorded on November 22nd, 1963. It will illustrate and explore some of the independent research from authors who have tried to unravel this 54-year-old homicide. This program was researched through these books. My primary sources are Warren Commission testimony and the exhibits, written FBI, New Orleans, and Dallas police reports, and written statements from witnesses and eyewitnesses, and at least 750 books on related articles. This presentation will focus on the remarkable scientific research of these authorities and their quest to establish the truth behind the assassination and military medical cover-up of President John F. Kennedy. David Lifton and Doug Horn are going to bring out. The interpretation of Air Force One tapes, the Clifton version, which was recorded on the flight from Dallas, the murder of President Kennedy, and JFK, A President Betrayed. I recommend this film. It's narrated by Morgan Freeman. Has anybody here seen that film? If you get a chance to see it, look at it. They touched very heavily on national security. I did an innovative verse, and you'll know not the lyrics, but you'll know the tune. 'Twas November 22nd, and all through the town, most citizens were preparing Kennedy's arrival downtown. The barricades were placed to the parade route with care, in hopes that our president soon would be there. I, in my uniform and Chauncey by the stall, had just parked behind the fence on the knoll. When what to our wondering eyes should appear, the presidential limo driven by Greer. The motorcade approached us with undaunted fear, as a fusillade of bullets tore through the air. The president kept waving to the people on the right, while a number of witnesses hit the ground with great fright. The presidential vehicle ground to a halt as the assassins prepared their final assault. Their motive was murder, 3 shots to his head. He wouldn't leave Dallas until he was dead. Arlington National Cemetery, November 25th, 1963. Jackie Kennedy, widow of assassinated President John F. Kennedy, holds the American flag that covered the coffin of her husband at Arlington National Cemetery. As an American citizen, I had the opportunity to grow up in a remarkable democratic country, the land of the free and the home of the brave, the United States of America. These phrases are not fairy tales. For the past 50 years, I elected to research the murder of President Kennedy. I have read more than 1,260 books, files, and documents, and interviewed over 80 eyewitnesses to this historic tragedy. As a high school social studies teacher and an adjunct professor in criminal justice, I created educational disciplines to implement this study and research into my daily lesson plans for the past 40 years. Why? Simple. The one thing missing in our government's explanation about the assassination of President Kennedy is the truth. I have been called a lot of names during my research. Let's make one thing perfectly clear. I am a conspiracy realist. Most conspiracy realists start out as conspiracy theorists. which the CIA recycled as a derogatory title used to dismiss critical thinkers. All histories are loaded with conspiracies. Every war has 1,000 conspiracies, and the first casualty of any conflict is the truth. The program you are about to see is based on truth. It will sometimes be sprinkled with historical speculation in order to help fill in the blanks. Over the past 54 years, our federal government, the state of Texas, the state of Florida, the state of Louisiana, the state of New York, the state of California, the state of Ohio, the Dallas Police Department, the Dallas Sheriff's Office, the Texas Rangers, the Central Intelligence Agency, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the Office of Naval Intelligence, the National Security Agency, the National Photographic Interpretation Center, the Defense Intelligence Agency, the United States State Department, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the Department of Navy, the Department of Army, the United States Marines, the United States Air Force, and the entire Department of Defense and NATO have elected not to present any and all information vital to solving the murder of President Kennedy. Why? The answer? National security. What is national security? No one really knows. There is certainly no precise definition of the term. It's actually whatever the government says it is. National security is one of the most meaningless, nebulous, nonsensical terms in the English language, but at the same time, the most important term in the lives of the American people. All the government has to do is say national security, and all the discussion and debate shuts down. If the government says that national security is at stake, that's the end of the story. Federal judges will immediately dismiss lawsuits as soon as the government claims the case is a threat to national security. Your Honor, Congress will immediately suspend investigations when the government claims that national security is at stake. The Justice Department will defer to the national security establishment when it raises the issue of national security. National security, a term not even in the Constitution, undercuts everything. It damages the judiciary, it destabilizes the legislative branch of government, it demoralizes federal criminal investigation. This nebulous term, whose meaning is whatever the government wants it to be at any particular time, has been made the foundation of American society. National security. What is the national security establishment? It is composed of several agencies, two of the main ones being the vast military and industrial establishment, the Pentagon, and the CIA. Those two entities have done more to transform American life than anything else, even more than the welfare state. They are the entities that enforce the sanctions and embargoes and engage in the invasions, occupations, regime changes, operations, coups, assassinations, torture, indefinite incarcerations, renditions, partnerships with totalitarian regimes, and executions, all in the name of national security. President Dwight David Eisenhower gave part of this address as he was leaving office in his farewell address of January 17, 1961. He says, "This conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new in the American experience. The total influence, economic, political, even spiritual, is felt in every city, every state house, every office of the federal government. We recognize the imperative need for this development, yet we must not fail to comprehend its grave implications. Our toil, resources, and livelihood are all involved, so that the very structure of our society, in the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist. We must never let the weight of this combination endanger our liberties or democratic process. We should take nothing for granted." Eisenhower gave us this as he was getting out of office, and he presented that to the American people. What do you think he was trying to tell us? Probably the very same thing that runs our government today. Everything is military. And we've built up our military for the purpose of what? National security. And we believe that our nation needs to be secure. But not only that, ever since the ending of Vietnam, we now take pride in our soldiers. It's about damn time, because they protect us. But at the same time, what do we do with war? Both former presidents, Harry Truman and Dwight Eisenhower, rode together to Arlington National Cemetery and discussed the death of JFK. Eisenhower looks at Harry and he says, "Harry, do you think the CIA killed JFK?" That's what he asked him. That's on November 25th, 1963. Because of this question, former President Harry Truman, who signed the National Security Act in 1947, which created the CIA, wrote in the Washington Post 30 days after the Kennedy assassination. I'm not sure if you'll see that in the movie, The Post. Okay? He says, "For some time I have been disturbed by the way the CIA has been diverted from its original assignment. It has become an operational and at times policy-making arm of the government. This has led to trouble and may have compounded our difficulties in several explosive areas. We have grown up as a nation respected for our free institutions and for our ability to maintain a free and open society. There is nothing about the way the CIA has been functioning that is casting a shadow over our historic position, and I feel that we need to correct it." Because of Truman's article, Truman says, while Truman saw CIA's attempted mousetrapping of President Kennedy as a particular outrage, his more general complaint is seen in his broader lament that the CIA had become so removed from its intended role. "I never had any thought that when I set up the CIA that it would be injected into peacetime cloak and dagger operations. It has become an operational and at times policy-making arm of the government, not only shaping policy through its control of intelligence, but also cloak and dagger operations, presumably including assassinations." After Kennedy was murdered in Dallas, the patrician, well-connected Allen Dulles, director of the CIA, former director of the CIA, got himself appointed to the Warren Commission and took the lead in shaping the investigation of JFK's assassination. Documents in the Truman Library show that Dulles also mounted a small domestic covert action of his own to neutralize any further airing of Truman's and Sauer's warnings about covert action. So important was this that Dulles, that he invented a pretext, a lie, to get himself invited to visit Truman in Independence, Missouri. On the afternoon of April 17, 1964, Dulles spent a half-hour one-on-one with former president and trying to get him to retract what he had written in his op-ed. "Hell no," said Harry. "Not a problem," Dulles decided. 4 days later, in a formal memorandum of conversation for his old buddy Lawrence Houston, CIA General Counsel from 1947 to 1973, Dulles fabricated a private retraction for Truman, claiming that Truman told him that the Washington Post article was all wrong, and that Truman seemed quite astounded by it. Those are all lies, guys. Hell no. Does that sound like Harry Truman?
Yeah.
The assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963 was not the random act of a lone malcontent devoid of meaning or of political consequences. Rather, it was a domestic coup d'etat carried out by elements of the national security state in reaction to JFK's foreign and military policy and covered up by the elements of the federal government. Now, in order for me to say something like that, I better have something to back that up. And what you're about to see is the cover-up. Once you understand the cover-up, then it'll go right straight to national security. And once you get to national security, then you need to come to my next presentation. Killing President Kennedy, fabricating his autopsy, and institutionalizing its cover-up was a covert intelligence blueprint ordered by the national security state, designed by the Pentagon and the CIA, and executed by military intelligence, the CIA, and the Secret Service as an off-the-shelf, self-sustaining, standalone entity that staged the murder of President Kennedy outside the law, the Constitution, and covered it up within the blanket of national security. Objective: to physically remove President Kennedy's body from Air Force One and prepare it for illicit post-mortem surgery. Purpose: to remove from the President's head and body any and all evidence of shots fired from the front and right front. Reason: so that the autopsy results would conform to the official cover story or legend, namely that JFK had been the victim of an assassination by a lone gunman, firing above and from behind, all shots coming from the Texas School Book Depository Building. Arthur Schlesinger, JFK historian. Like Arthur Schlesinger, Kennedy's craven assistant, who when asked to watch the Zapruder film's infamous frame 313, the kill shot, turned his head and walked away saying, "I can't look, I won't look. We will become accomplices by neglect in the ongoing hijacking of the country by the secret state." A transfer of control of the body of JFK was essential and necessary after the murder of President Kennedy to determine the cause of death through an autopsy. David Lifton says the best evidence in any murder case is the body. A controlled and fabricated United States military autopsy awaited JFK at Bethesda Naval Hospital in Bethesda, Maryland. This autopsy was a covert military operation to conceal the true facts behind the murder of President Kennedy. See, we don't even need to go to the murder of JFK. Just go to this. And when you go to this, this is what's coming out of the archives. This is what came out of the archives 1992 through 1997. You think the mainstream media is going to print this? Nope. Absolutely not. While transporting JFK on Air Force One from Dallas to Andrews Air Force Base, and after 54 years of research, we now have 90% of the Air Force One audio tapes and an account of who was in charge of the body of President Kennedy in Dallas, Secret Service agent Roy Kellerman, and who was giving the orders what to do with the body, Secret Service agent Gerald Bain at the White House. Everything in this program is grounded around one basic and undeniable fact, that the heavy bronze reddish-brown ceremonial casket from Dallas was empty. Was empty when the public saw it unloaded from Air Force One on live television shortly after 6:04 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, and placed into a light gray naval cardiac ambulance. Now, I went out of my way to make these. This is what you're going to see. Of course, Dave said something, he says, would you get these for to throw at people if they're sleeping? I said, maybe in my class at school I might do that. But these represent coffins. This is the coffin in Dallas, and this is the coffin that JFK came in. Okay? And you'll see by the evidence and the eyewitnesses and the reports on this. Okay? Now, the books that you need to read on this would be books like this. David Lifton. David Lifton put this book out in 1980, 1981, and when I first got a hold of this book, I read it in a day and a half. 1,000 pages. I called up school and said, I am sick and tired of school. And I don't feel very good. I'm going to stay home and read. So I read from 6 o'clock in the evening till the time the alarm went off, and I said, and that's when I called him up. I said, I'm tired, I'm sick. And so I read that whole book. Now, I had to read it again because I did not understand the medical terminology. When they threw out things like a parasagittal laceration. Do you have any idea what a parasagittal laceration is?
Some kind of cut.
Yeah, a laceration is cut. A para, side by side, brain lobes. It's an autopsy. It's what you're talking about, craniotomy, and that's what we see here. And when the doctors at Bethesda first opened the coffin and took JFK out, they said, well, we note that he has a parasagittal laceration. Unless you actually knew what that was. And I took it for granted. I said, well, hell, I went to high school, Catholic school, and I said, mea culpa, mea culpa. And of course, most of us didn't interpret that, but parasagittal, that's Latin terminology, side by side. They're describing surgery to the president's head. When they bring the body out and they say, well, he's had surgery to the top of his head. The top of his head's been cut off. And the brain's gone. And one of the guys there says, well, what the hell was he hit with? A howitzer? Actual quote. I mean, he doesn't have anything left. Okay? So, that's 1981. There are 5 books on the Assassinations Record Review Board. This is Doug Horn. Doug Horn sat on that, and I know Doug Horn personally because I spoke with him for probably about 2 years straight, because he's one of the guys that I like reading his books because I can understand. He puts it in layman's terminology. But it's Doug Horn that you need to understand. He's the one who talked to all these doctors, which I'm going to show you. Okay? How many of you remember seeing this on national TV when you were small?
That's all there was that week.
Yeah. On all 3 channels plus,
All 3 channels.
and if you were lucky to get Topeka, whatever Topeka was.
Cloudy, you could get Topeka or St. Joe.
Yeah.
But that's all they.
That's all it was.
That's all there was.
Yeah.
That's all they had. Light gray, navy. Navy color is blue.
Well,
What's the ambulance doing light gray when it's a navy ambulance? It'd be blue or white.
and here's the key. It's a light gray naval cardiac ambulance. It's not a hearse.
No.
Okay? Yeah, it's not a hearse.
It's not a hearse.
And you know what?
It's not
These guys knew that Kennedy was dead. He was coming off in a coffin. So what do they have? Well, you'll find out what this is about. This is, wow, this is crazy stuff. Okay, this is the rear entrance of the Bethesda morgue. We know this because President Kennedy's body was offloaded in a pinkish gray metal shipping casket. It arrived in a black mortuary-style cardiac hearse at the rear entrance of the Bethesda morgue 20 minutes before. So, he leaves Dallas in this ornate, beautiful casket, comes in a shipping casket, things that we would ship bodies home in Vietnam. Dallas, this is what they see, and then later on we'll see this again. And I'm telling you, when I first read this book, I go, I am lost. So I said, my job is to present this to people so that they don't get lost. You will get lost. Stay with me though. Not only is this coming out of the archives, it was there years before, but now it's coming out, and now we have documented proof not only of that, but now the eyewitnesses are coming forward. The motorcade from Andrews Air Force Base, supposedly transporting the body of President Kennedy in the Dallas casket in the light gray naval cardiac ambulance, arrived at the front of the Navy Hospital, 7:03 p.m. Okay, why? Why did the body arrive 20 minutes before the actual casket arrives? Okay? Now, to us, we don't know that. We're grieving. And we want to get to who shot him. We don't care about this stuff. Well, why? Because the objective of the Secret Service in the immediate aftermath of the assassination was to spirit the body of President Kennedy to a designated site where the crime scene, i.e. the body, could be sanitized, where all evidence of frontal shots, both frontal entrance wounds and bullet fragments, could be removed from the president's body. This program supports the conclusion that JFK's body was removed from the Dallas bronze ceremonial casket on board Air Force One prior to the arrival at Andrews Air Force Base. JFK's body was secretly transported to Bethesda Naval Hospital before the presidential motorcade arrived, carrying the empty bronze ceremonial casket from Dallas. Have I lost you yet? Okay, stay with me because I'm telling you. Recent National Archives documents and the translation of Air Force One tapes proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the White House Situation Room was calling the shots and executing the orders from the national security state to terminate the life of JFK. We'll get into that on my next presentation. To hijack his body from Air Force One, to remove all bullets and bullet fragments that would indicate shots fired from the front and the right front. Kennedy's miscalculations. John Kennedy miscalculated an enemy who proved stronger than he. His elimination on November 22, 1963 in Dallas, followed not long afterwards by his brother Robert, fitted the purposes of General Lyman Lemnitzer, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and Allen Dulles, former director of the CIA, both fired by President Kennedy. The mission to purify Asia went ahead with refreshed zeal under Lyndon Johnson, President of the United States. The Cold War intensified, with Lemnitzer in precisely the right location, NATO, to make sure that it did. The military-industrial complex hummed as never before. Only defiant Cuba spoiled this blissful prospect. Now, for years, people have been saying the CIA was behind the murder of JFK. I'm not gonna say that they weren't. But where does the CIA's charter legally give them an opportunity to go out and commit political assassinations? Outside the United States. In Europe. Under NATO. I'm just going to point you in that direction. If you want to know where some of the assassins come from, that's where they're coming from. That's what's coming out. Now, it's 54 years old. Who gives a damn? And what am I going to do with it? Overturn the government of the United States? I don't think it's already been overturned. General Lyman Lemnitzer, CIA Director Allen Dulles, and President Lyndon Johnson. The national security state. The government of the United States of America was responsible for the murder of John F. Kennedy. And the leaders and beneficiaries who wore green and blue uniforms, which had a lot of citations on the tunics, gold braids on the hats, gold or silver marks of rank, and striped pants that ended just above the highly polished boots. The November 22, 1963 execution of John F. Kennedy was the final act. It was the collision of two high-speed locomotives, one hell-bent on war breaking out and the use of thermonuclear weapons if possible, and the other hell-bent on ending the Cold War. They murdered President Kennedy in Dallas, Texas, then engineered his autopsy at the Bethesda Naval Hospital. The plot to assassinate President Kennedy was designed to deceive both people in the government and the public at large. A convincing trail of evidence was established to make it appear that the Kennedy brothers' plan to overthrow Castro had been turned around and used against them by Fidel himself, resulting in the assassination of President Kennedy. Have we heard this broadcast year after year after year? Walter Cronkite, all these people, all these good, solid people whom he believed in all these years? Okay, I'm going to tell you, and you may not like this word, it's bullshit.
Yeah.
It is a complete lie. It's a fabrication. All truths are easy to understand once they are discovered. The point is to discover them. Some working definitions. Autopsy. An autopsy is a postmortem assessment or examination of a body to determine the cause of death. An autopsy is performed by a physician trained in pathology. Charade. An absurd pretense intended to create a pleasant or respectable appearance. Shuffle. To rearrange pristine evidence of a crime by the manipulation of this evidence for an acceptable conclusion or recreation of a genuine artifact. Change of command ceremonies in Dealey Plaza, November 22nd, 1963. Dallas police officer James Shawnee said he heard the first shot and remembered that it sounded like a motorcycle backfiring. He immediately looked to his right and saw that President Kennedy had looked back over his left shoulder within the limousine. Officer Cheney further stated that the second shot hit JFK in the face. I don't know about you guys, that sounds like it's from the front. A third shot was fired, and he saw Governor Conley's shirt erupt in blood. Secret Service agent Sam Kennedy stated, he saw the back of JFK's head come off immediately when the fatal shot struck him. Kennedy was watching JFK's head in the rear bumper of the limo as a normal part of his duty to maintain a 5-foot distance between the follow-up car and JFK's limo, something he had done many times. It was the right rear. I saw that part blow out. We're not even at Bethesda yet. You got shots from the front and the back of his head going out. We're still in Dallas. We haven't got to Parkland yet. Secret Service agent Clint Hill was directly assigned as protective custody for Mrs. Kennedy. Agent Hill witnessed and observed President Kennedy's head wound in the limousine and at Parkland Hospital. Secret Service agent Hill stated, the right rear portion of his head was missing. It was lying in the rear seat of the car. His brain was exposed. There was blood and bits of brain all over the entire rear portion of the car. Mrs. Kennedy was completely covered with blood. There was so much blood you could not tell if there had been any other wound or not, except for the one large gaping wound in the right rear portion of the head. It's right here. Okay. Good question. Why did she have that? Well, when Jackie Kennedy got off the plane, she was immediately given the yellow roses of Texas. No, she wasn't. She was given the red rose of Texas. And for a long time, people said, well, the yellow rose is a Texas state flower. It's not. Bluebonnet is. Okay? The bluebonnet is a state of Texas flower. But she was given the red. Royalty. Okay? And then there were several books put out that shoot at the guy next to the lady with the red roses that came out of Europe. But Jackie Kennedy immediately walked out, she shook hands with an 85-year-old woman who was a Democratic chairperson at the time, and she said, I want to give this to you to give to your son, who I know has watched Kukla, Fran, and Ollie for years. And I know it's his birthday on the 25th, so please accept this and give this to your son. That's why she had it. And she put it under the roses to stop the prickly, the points. And so when she turned to grab her husband, the roses pop up, and so does this. Sitting in the back seat there. That's not a very good picture, but that's, you find out in Dallas, you're going to find out that almost all the assassination pictures are not very good pictures. But every picture other than the assassination pictures are great color and great proportion. All right, let's see what we have. Ed Hoffman, eyewitness, sees a rifleman fire a shot from the north grassy knoll. Now there's two grassy knolls, the north and the south. He sees a person shoot from here on President Kennedy's side. Okay? Within seconds after the shooting in the plaza, Ed sees the presidential limousine momentarily pause below his location, 15 feet away from the presidential limousine. This is what Ed saw. He sees Secret Service agent Clint Hill straddling the top of the trunk in the back seat. Jackie is kneeling on the floorboard of JFK's seat. She has her hands on his back and is shaking him. JFK is face down on Jackie's seat. Ed Hoffman describes the massive head wound to the back of JFK's head. Guys, we haven't even got to Parkland yet, and we have shots hitting him in the front and blowing out the back of his head. In the front and the back of his head. We haven't been to Parkland Hospital yet. We're down in Dallas. Dealey Plaza. The story of Ed Hoffman can be found in this best-selling book. Sure, it's my book. I'm not sure how best-selling it is until you guys buy it and purchase it. And we'll sign it for you, so. Secret Service agents and Mrs. Kennedy rolled President Kennedy into the Parkland Hospital. Secret Service Agent Kennedy helped remove President Kennedy from the back seat of the car with the help of Clint Hill, Roy Kellerman, and Dave Powers. His brain was blown out. There was nothing left. There was brain matter all over the place. He had no brains left in his head. The doctors rushed to Parkland Hospital, rushed to trauma room number 1 with the remote possibility of saving the life of President Kennedy. 26 doctors, Parkland medical personnel, rushed in to try to save the president's life. Mr. Kennedy had a massive gaping wound in the back on the right side of his head. A missile had gone in from the front and out the back of his head, causing external lacerations and loss of brain tissue. Doctors Perry and Doctors Clark said that. Now we're at Parkland. President Kennedy was in trauma room probably no more than 12 minutes. And those 26 doctors, medical personnel, were roaming around trying to figure out what to do. What do I do? And he looks like he's dead. Don't even say that. Do the cut downs. I mean, they cut down his pant leg, they removed stuff, they slit his throat to do a tracheostomy or a cricothyroidotomy. Okay? At 1 p.m., Dr. Ken Clark officially declared President Kennedy dead. Every Parkland doctor, nurse, and medical staff personnel observed these wounds on President Kennedy. This wound right here was not noted by the Parkland doctors. We believe the reason that wasn't noted by the doctors is because Kennedy was lying on his head this way. And his head was not rolling, it was laying flat because the back of his head was open up. And the blood was rolling down this way. And so when they started working on his head, they saw a bullet wound here, a bullet wound here, entrance, and the back of his head blown out. They didn't see this because they were only there for about 12 minutes. Okay? The Secret Service ordered a bronze ceremonial casket. Here we go. Bronze ceremonial casket. Father Oscar Huber came to trauma room number 1 to give President Kennedy the last rites of the Catholic Church. Father Huber was led to trauma room 1, and Mrs. Kennedy, the president, was covered with a sheet. I did not speak to him. It was evident he could not answer. Father Huber pulled the sheet down below the president's nose and was sure that he was dead, in a clinical sense. But Father Huber also thought it possible that President Kennedy's soul had not yet departed, so he began to administer the last rites, extreme unction. President Kennedy's body is covered in a white sheet and placed in this bronze ceremonial casket from the O'Neill Funeral Home. Aubrey Wright, who I've known for years, who's now deceased, talked to him on several occasions. He's an O'Neill ambulance service driver, helped lift President Kennedy into the bronze ceremonial casket at Parkland Hospital. The president's head was wrapped in a sheet and his body was enclosed with another sheet. Wright stated, "You could feel the sharp edges of the bone at the edge of the hole in the back of his head." Dr. Earl Rose, professor of medicine, Dallas coroner and forensic pathologist at Parkland Hospital, was in his office at Parkland Memorial Hospital across the corridor from trauma room 1 when he received word that President Kennedy was pronounced dead. He walked across the corridor to the trauma room occupied by Jackie Kennedy and a priest, Father Huber, who had been called to administer the last rites to President Kennedy. Dr. Rose was met by Secret Service agent Roy Kellerman and Kennedy's personal physician, Dr. George Berkeley, who told him that there was no time for an autopsy because Mrs. Kennedy could not leave Dallas without her husband's body, which was to be delivered promptly to the airport. Texas law and the autopsy of JFK. At the time of the assassination of President Kennedy, the murder of a United States president was not covered by federal law. Dr. Earl Rose, Parkland coroner, objected, insisting that Texas law requires him to perform a post-mortem examination prior to the removal of the body. Kennedy's body was placed in a casket accompanied by Mrs. Kennedy and rolled down the corridor on a gurney. Dr. Charles Crenshaw and Dr. Kim Clark witnessed this JFK casket confrontation with Dr. Earl Rose, Secret Service agent Roy Kellerman, and several of President Kennedy's White House personnel at Parkland. As JFK's casket is being rolled out of Parkland Hospital, Dr. Earl Rose, Dallas coroner, stepped in front of the casket and encountered a war of words by the Secret Service and Kennedy personnel escorting the casket. Roy Kellerman stated, "My friend, this is the body of the President of the United States, and we are going to take it back to Washington." Earl Rose, "No, that's not the way things are. When there is a homicide, we must have an autopsy." Roy Kellerman, "He's the President, he's going with us." Dr. Rose, "The body stays." Secret Service agent Kellerman took an erect stance in front of JFK's casket and brought his firearm into a ready position. The other Secret Service agents followed course by draping their coattails over the butts of their holstered pistols. "My friend, my name is Roy Kellerman. I am Special Agent in charge of the White House detail of the Secret Service. We are taking President Kennedy back to the Capitol." "You are not taking the body anywhere. There is a law here. We're going to enforce it." Dr. George Berkeley, he says, "Mrs. Kennedy is going to stay exactly where she is until the body is moved. We can't have that. He's the President of the United States." Earl Rose says, "That doesn't matter. You can't lose the chain of evidence." Dave Powers, Special Assistant to President Kennedy, screamed at Dr. Earl Rose, "God damn it, get your ass out of the way before you get hurt. We're taking the body now." Dr. Earl Rose is physically removed from his position in front of the casket by the Secret Service. He is thrown up against the wall. The casket is rolled to the ambulance loading dock. The chain of evidence is broken. You know, for a long time, Earl Warren would say, "You may never know anything about this in your lifetime." Well, I'm not waiting until I'm 89 years old till they release all the damn documents. Now, I may be dead and gone, but the students that I've taught, they're going to go on. They're going to ask the questions. Okay? The bronze casket containing JFK is placed in a white hearse from the O'Neill Funeral Home. The body of JFK is guarded and protected by the Secret Service. Good God. Where was that protection in Dealey Plaza? Mrs. Kennedy is escorted by Secret Service agent in charge, Roy Kellerman. The hearse prepares to leave Parkland Hospital. The white hearse carrying President Kennedy leaves Parkland Hospital and heads to Love Airfield, preventing the autopsy in Dallas. Under Texas law in 1963, Texas state officials were required to conduct autopsies in homicide cases. Under the law, it wasn't a discretionary duty, it was a legal requirement. After Kennedy was pronounced dead, the Dallas County coroner, Dr. Earl Rose, announced his intention to conduct an autopsy on Kennedy's body. At that point, however, one of the most extraordinary events in the history of U.S. criminal justice took place. Rose refused to permit the body to be removed from Parkland Hospital, reminding the Secret Service team that Texas law mandated the autopsy. Secret Service in charge, Roy Kellerman, pointed his gun at Dr. Rose, and the other Secret Service agents pulled back their coat jackets to reveal their weapons to Rose and anyone else who might resist them. Now just think about that for a moment. Secret Service agents implicitly threatened to kill a physician who was just doing his job and following the law, and anyone else who interfered with their forcible and illegal removal of the President's body from Parkland Hospital. It is incredible. When have we ever heard of such a thing happening? Either before November 22nd, 1963 or since. Law enforcement officials worked together to solve problems. Moreover, at the time of that violent altercation at Parkland Hospital, those Secret Service agents had to understand that an accurate autopsy would be a necessary part of any criminal prosecution against anyone accused of having killed the President. Wouldn't you think that the Secret Service team would ordinarily say, "Yes, of course, Dr. Rose, we understand. Please proceed to conduct the autopsy, and we will wait. Why would that Secret Service team engage in what can only be considered extremely bizarre behavior? Military and national security orders from the White House. That's where the orders were coming from. Get the body out. We're not going to have an autopsy here. We're going to get it to a good place. Meanwhile, back inside Parkland at 1:15 p.m., Dr. Tom Shires from Parkland Hospital describes the wounds of President Kennedy to members of the press. Now it's interesting. Do you see that little ABC down there, the color ABC? Okay. When Tom Shires was doing this, and all of the things that you're going to see, ABC took this off. They didn't want their logo on there. That's where the logo is at that time. So I put it back on there. Okay. At 1:33 p.m., Dr. Shires hands the medical conference to Malcolm Kilduff, JFK's assistant press secretary. Malcolm Kilduff, his press secretary, officially announces the death of President Kennedy. President Kennedy died at approximately 1 p.m. Central Standard Time today in Dallas. He died of a gunshot to the brain. Dr. Berkeley told me it is a simple matter of a bullet right through the brain. Asked by reporters, "Can you say where the bullet entered his head?" Kilduff replied, "It is my understanding that it entered the temple on the right side, the right temple." Now, I am going to tell you this. Over the years, I kept looking at this and I'm going, I know I'm not 100% good in math, but the quickest or the straightest line is from point A to point B. It's a straight line. Okay? When you draw that line from the bullet hole here to the back of his head, it doesn't come from the right side of the grassy knoll. Any idea where it comes from? It comes from the grassy knoll on the other side. Oh my God. Could this be a conspiracy? Oh man. Hold on to that thought. For years, I can remember Devin and several people, even David, we'd sit up in Dealey Plaza and I said, I can't imagine a shot from there. It just doesn't fit the angle. And we'd go down on the grass, the fence line, and I go, that's not the angle of the shot. And we walk up on the triple underpass, triple overpass, and I go, oh man, but nobody saw anybody from up there.
Casey, can I ask you one question?
Sure.
Wasn't the Texas School Book Depository building behind him?
Yes. The Texas School Book Depository and Lee Harvey Oswald, if he's really there,
He's really there.
is behind all the time. He's behind, and the Texas School Book Depository is behind and a little bit to his left. Okay? Okay, now, all right. Mr. Kennedy had a massive gaping wound in the back and on the right side of his head. A missile had gone in from the front of his head and out the back of his head, causing external lacerations and loss of brain tissue. Dr. Malcolm Perry. And he's in this interview, and he's telling these people this. Now, noted author Doug Horn discloses, we now have hard evidence of 3 sequential shots hitting President Kennedy in his head. Now, follow these shots and do the math. You see, for years, social scientists like myself come up with these theories. But when you put math and science together, the theories now become real. Okay? The South Grassy Knoll is directly involved in this scientific and mathematical analysis, which is consistent with released documents from the National Archives and medical eyewitness accounts conducted by Doug Horn and the Assassinations Record and Review Board. And that's from 1992 to 1997. 4 million documents. And by the time we get through those, it's probably about 2017. And they're ready to release more. And I'm going, wow, we haven't even got through these yet. Author Doug Horn discloses, the evidence indicates that the first headshot hits JFK in the right occipital lobe area. Now JFK is facing away from the Texas School Book Depository building. He said the first shot hits him in the back of the head here. Okay? That's pretty consistent with what the Warren Commission says. Okay? Except for when you get to the Warren Commission, they don't know whether it's here, or here, or here. Good God, guys, did you see the body at all? No, they didn't. All right? Doug Horn continues. He says, a second shot hits JFK in the center front of his head. Here. Frontal shot. Kennedy, as he's hit in the back of the head, first of all, he's hit in the throat. I haven't talked about that one yet. Then he's hit in the back of the head. And he comes up like this, and he's turning to his left toward his wife and looking down. Shot hits him in the front of the head here, 5 degrees up, and blows out the back of his head. Now that fits. That's from the South Grassy Knoll. But we have everybody running to the North Grassy Knoll. If you know anything about military tactics and diversionary shots, you fire a bunch of shots here and everybody goes, oh my God, and they run up there. But the kill shot came from the other side. Okay? That's what's coming out of the archives. But nobody reads those, except for people like me. Okay. As that shot came in from the front, hit him in the center of the head, it blew out that part of the head that the entrance wound came in from the back. So boom, 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 this goes out. As it's going out, it's coupled from a shot from the right front that blows Kennedy's head back into the left, which is observed in the movie JFK, and it throws, as this is coming off, it throws this off on Jackie Kennedy's side. It makes great sense when you start putting all this together. And when you actually have documentation and eyewitness testimony that now says this is what happened. Gee, where was this in 1963 and 64? You're not going to see it. In fact, we're not even going to see the Zapruder film until 1975. I know a lot of people say, well, yeah, you saw it right off. No, we didn't. No. Court order. The first time anybody saw it was 1967, 68 in the Clay Shaw trial. And they finally got a 40th generation copy. Then Jim Garrison got upset and says, I want the real thing. Finally gets subpoena power, gets it down. And I can tell you, in 1970, I had a copy of the Zapruder film. And I'll tell you how I got it. I can tell you now because most of the people who gave it to me are dead. Jim Garrison tried hard to get a copy of the film, and he was told that it can't be copied. So 4 or 5 people who were working around him that day said, let's go ahead and copy, nobody will know. He says, well, I can't do that, guys. I'm a lawyer, I'm tied to the government, and he says, I can't do that. But he says, here's the film. I will be gone about 1 hour and a half. Here's the film, it's going to be right here. And it better be here when I get back. But I will be gone for about 1 hour and a half. Okay? Now, we can't say for sure that they took the film and copied it, but I can because that's how I got the copy. Probably ended my first marriage, too. Spent more money on that than I did on her, so priorities. Okay, so this shot coming in from the front, which the doctors at Parkland didn't see, fits geographically, arithmetically, with the shot that blew out the back of his head at this angle. Okay? In 1967, Professor Josiah Tink Thompson published a book called 6 Seconds in Dallas, a micro-study of the Kennedy assassination. In the book, Thompson argues that 4 shots were fired by 3 gunmen. The 3rd and 4th shots were fired simultaneously and hit President Kennedy in the back of the head, the right occipital lobe, and which was an entrance wound, coupled with a fatal shot from the North Grassy Knoll. So he's seeing this with what material he has. So boom, boom, and now, but mathematically you can't put these together. And that's why my students would sit up there going, that shot didn't happen. It couldn't have done that. Okay? But we do know bullets do strange things. I was a medic. Bullets do strange. You get shot here and you ended up picking the bullet up out of your ankle. All right. He said the right occipital bone, leaving a large exit wound, and blasted out the entrance wound on the back. Okay, now Doug Horn continues. He says shot number 3, which hits JFK in the right temple, as the Parkland doctors saw right here, just above his right eye, came from the north grassy knoll. Ed Hoffman's gunman. Okay? A single shot from the front, south grassy knoll, near the corner of the railroad bridge, coupled with a single shot from the right front, the north grassy knoll, at the corner of the fence line, propelled JFK back into the left, as seen in the Zapruder film. And the back of JFK's right occipital lobe is blasted out the back of his head. Shot number 1, Dow Tex. Shot number 2, south grassy knoll. And shot number 3, the grassy knoll on the north side. And those shots are going boom, boom, boom. Just like that. Just like the eyewitness says, I heard a shot, now I heard 2 shots right on top of each other. You can't fire the Mannlicher Carcano rifle that fast. It's a bolt action rifle. It takes 2.3 seconds just to recycle it. Boom, boom, boom. Right on top of each other. So, the occipital bone is blown out of JFK's head, and part of it lands in the little grassy triangle on Jackie Kennedy's side. Jim Mars, in his 1989 book, Crossfire, The Plot That Killed Kennedy, was a New York Times paperback nonfiction bestseller and became a basis for Oliver Stone's film JFK in 1991. Jim served as a chief consultant for the film. The Harper fragment. This is fantastic. Bill Harper's description of the bone, along with the finding of the examination in Dallas of the bone, is perfectly consistent with the Parkland medical personnel's description of the massive wound in the right rear of JFK's head. Now, he's walking through Dealey Plaza on the 23rd, Saturday, and he walks across something and he goes, what the heck's that? So he reaches down and he says, my God, what is this? Well, his uncle, I think at the time, brought it in. He says, it's the occipital lobe of somebody's head. And he says, well, whose head could it be? Well, who was just shot? And I think they knew that at that time. Sherry Feaster, senior crime investigator, believes that the JFK conspiracy is the biggest conspiracy in history. The consequence of President Kennedy's assassination resound to today. Since 1963, forensic investigation techniques have evolved, and technology has become more advanced in a wide variety of fields. Senior crime investigator Sherry Feaster has the research, the science, and the facts. There was more than one shooter in Dealey Plaza. Please read her book, Enemy of the Truth. Sherry Feaster believes in science. She believes that one of the fatal headshots hit JFK from this location, somewhere in this area. There's a possibility that there's 2 people in this area. The South Grassy Knoll. Sherry Feaster believes that Abraham Zapruder was filming from Kennedy's right, 90 degrees to the limousine. However, at the moment of the fatal head shots, JFK is not in profile. He is turning towards his wife and looking down to his left. At this moment in the Zapruder film, JFK has been shot in the throat, from the front, in the back, from behind, and in the back of his head, the right occipital bone, from behind. Scientifically researched, Sherry Feaster believes that compelling evidence exists of a shot fired from the corner of the railroad bridge on the South Grassy Knoll, which we now know there was a bullet hole in JFK's top skull, which corresponds mathematically and scientifically with the exit wound in the back of JFK's head. As that is blown out, it blows out portions of that bone which land in the little grassy area, which is going to be found a day later. That shot is coupled with a shot fired from the corner fence line of the North Grassy Knoll. That bone lands in that grassy area. This third headshot fired from the north grassy knoll propels JFK's head and debris back and to the left, causing the part of his right occipital bone to fly to Jackie's left, lands in Dealey Plaza in the grass infield. This is the geographic locations of where these people might have been. Well, wait a minute. We do have pictures from that area at that time. This is Frank Cancellari's photo of the south knoll, just moments after the last round of shots in Dealey Plaza. You can still see two motorcycle policemen out there who are flanking the president on either side of the limousine. Injured eyewitness James Tagg, well, there's the grassy knoll, the corner that we're going to be talking about. And then you have injured eyewitness James Tagg standing underneath the triple underpass. You can see Bill and Gail Newman are on the ground, covering their two kids. As we look a little closer, we're looking in the area where it's very possible shots came from. And lo and behold, there are two people there. There's one right here. And what does he have in his arm?
Rifle.
He has a rifle. And there's a guy right here. Now, this is moments after the assassination of the president. Okay? There's a man holding a rifle on the south grassy knoll. Ed Tatro had this picture, one of our researchers. He showed it to this photo to Dr. Cyril Wecht. Wecht went ballistic. I was there when he showed him this, and I can only say a few words about what he said. He says, "God damn it, God damn it." He said, "Where was this stuff when I was presenting this material?" And I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my God." So, it's really kind of neat when you actually see this happen. And I'm just telling you point blank, that's what was said. And you know, I go back to World War II, and do you think General Patton came in and didn't say any curse words when he told this man that 90% of you are not coming back? I'm sure he said some prayers, but, you know. Of course, those are all deleted in our history nowadays. Sherry Feaster gauges using Zapruder frame 312. The street elevation at Zapruder frame 312 is 418.6 feet, plus the height of the limo, 57 inches, which moves the limo up to 423.75 feet. The elevation at the south end of the overpass, the handrail, is 428.4 feet, a 4.62 foot elevation, approximately 5-foot trajectory, frontal shot, low frontal shot, from the railroad bridge on the south grassy knoll. I don't know about you, but I'm not a hunter. But anybody that I talk to hunters, they go, "That's a perfect shot." The south grassy knoll on the corner of the railroad bridge, one key location used by assassins to fire the fatal headshots of President Kennedy, 4.65 foot elevation. Sherry Feaster brought a professional Marine Corps sniper, retired Lieutenant Colonel Craig Roberts, to Dealey Plaza. They surveyed the scene of JFK's murder and walked the entire area surrounding the assassination site. Sherry asked Craig for his professional opinion as to where he would place himself if he had the orders to murder JFK. Craig didn't say a word and walked to the area at the corner of the railroad bridge on the south grassy knoll. This is a professional sniper, United States Marine. Craig said, if I was going to shoot anybody, this would be the shot. Years later, Tosh Plumlee, a retired CIA contract pilot, claims he was in Dealey Plaza on November 22nd, 1963. He walked the assassination site with Sherry. He heard and smelled the discharge of gunfire at the corner of the railroad bridge on the south grassy knoll. There's Tosh in Dealey Plaza. I'm on the other side when this picture was taken. I met Tosh, we ate dinner together. I have problems trying to believe what he's saying. but he said he was part of a CIA abort team to go down and stop the assassination. Well, and I'm telling you what, when you get into that murky business, I'm trying to figure out exactly who's telling the truth and who's not. But he said that he heard a shot being fired from there. And he said he could smell gun smoke. John F. Kennedy was the victim of a coordinated crossfire that practically blew his head off, where the Zapruder film was revised to conceal that fact. But with imperfect success, this home movie, ostensibly taken by Abraham Zapruder, was suppressed by Life magazine for 12 years and only shown to a jury by Jim Garrison during the 1969 trial of Clay Shaw in New Orleans. Robert Groden was able to have a bootleg copy aired by Geraldo Rivera in 1975. In recent years, the Zapruder film has been proven to have been subjected to extensive alteration, apparently to hide the sequence and direction of shots which struck the president, and equally important, to mask the Secret Service's own complicity in bringing the limousine to a halt, as well as to their actions during the limo, as verified by 5 of the immediate escort motorcycle officers who were riding in the motorcade that day. These interviews provide stunning confirmation that the vehicles were brought to a complete halt, including that Officer Bobby Hargis, riding to the left rear, parked his bike and ran in between the limos to reach the grassy knoll, and that 5 Secret Service agents, apart from Clint Hill, dismounted from the Queen Mary, which is the backup car, and surrounded the presidential limo. How many of you have seen the Zapruder film? You see any of this in there? No. That entire Zapruder film has been altered. Okay? The Altigans photograph, photograph number 7, above was snapped by witness Ike Altigan within seconds after the volley of assassination shots ended. Viewers can see the bullet hole in the front windshield. Can you see it?
Yep.
Okay. Evidence of a frontal shot to the presidential limousine. This shot went through the glass windshield and possibly hit JFK in the throat, the front entrance wound, and came from the front, a 5-foot low frontal trajectory. January 27, 1964. I remember that date primarily because it's a little over 2 months after the murder of President Kennedy, and I'm reading in the Warren Commission documents. Not in 64, but this is when it took place in 64. I'm reading this probably in about 74, 75, something like this. But I'm reading these documents, and all of a sudden, there's a meeting. There's a high-level meeting with the Warren Commissioners in Washington, D.C. And so on January 27th, 1964, what is important about this meeting is that these commissioners are going to see the Zapruder film for the very first time. Okay? And they have a stenographer who's recording everything. And as they see it for the very first time, you can't hear a word. Then all of a sudden, one of them says, "Can you roll that back again? I think we're seeing something here." Okay? Then all of a sudden, it ends. And I'm going through the pages and I'm going, where is this? It ends right there. Now, that was 1964. In 1975, we finally get what is known as the off-record transcripts of the Warren Report. Okay? And those commission documents, you know, where I left off, this is what they say. This is, what, 12 years after you know, going through the Freedom of Information Act, we finally get this. This is what they say. Can you run that back again? We're seeing something that looks like a shot from the front. Wow. So, they run it back again. And about 2 or 3 of them say, "My God, that's a shot from the front." Run that back again. That's a shot from the front. That shot came from the front. Where was Oswald? He's behind. And here's what they say. So far I'm sitting here going, "Oh my God, this is great." So these learned men say, "We're going to have to go to Dallas and see if it's highly possible for somebody like Oswald to have shot the president from the 6th floor of the Texas School Depository Building, then run down all these stairs, come out in front of the grassy knoll, and then shoot him from the grassy knoll." And I'm reading that and I'm going, you know, I gotta read that again. Maybe I missed a verb or an adverb or an adjective. So I go back and read it again and I'm going, oh my God, they're really saying this. So guys, I'm just gonna point out to you, January 27, 1964, the Warren Commissioners knew that the president was shot in the front. And it was covered up. It was covered up, and it's still covered up to this day. And the people who applaud the Warren Commissioners today are some of the top news media personnel that say, oh yeah, the people like me, we're critics. We're buffs. Now, do you guys see me running around in the buff? I'm a buff. Biff the buff. No, I'm reading the stuff that's out of the Warren Commission documents and also in the testimony of the eyewitnesses, and not only that, the doctor's testimony. Now, I'm going to jump around on a couple of these things, but this is Zapruder's films. This is some frames from Zapruder. All right, this is Zapruder frame 230, and you can see Kennedy reacting to a shot. Okay. Zapruder frame 237. Just about the time Kennedy is reacting to that shot and his arms are going up a little further, Conley is now shot and reacting to a shot. Two separate shots, which virtually proves the Warren Commission wrong, because Oswald couldn't, this is less than a second. You can't fire the 6-point-millimeter rifle that fast. So basically they have to come up with a theory. The single bullet theory. I call it the single bullshit theory.
Yeah.
It never happened, guys. There was never anything like this, even out of Parkland and out of Dallas, and even at that particular time. Zapruder frame 238, you can see Conley at this particular time, his cheeks are puffed out. Person who usually gets shot in the chest, in the lung area, there's with a trauma event like a bullet going through your lung, air is going to go up and down. So air is coming out, and that's what you see in his cheek. And that's the moment that shot took place. Now the problem with this, I just got through telling you that the whole Warren, or the Zapruder film has been altered. So now, oh God. When I started, about 20 years ago, I just wanted to take the Zapruder film and just throw it against the wall. The history books, the government books, I'm done. Well, I was done for about a day. I just kind of got over that. I just said, geez, this is crazy. All right? And as Kennedy is continuing to react, Conley is turning. Now, what is interesting here, and I don't have that frame to show you, but Jackie Kennedy is moving over toward her husband. As she moves over toward her husband, she hears Conley yell some words out. Okay? Now, it was put out that he said, my God, they're going to kill us all. Didn't say that. He said, my God, they're going to kill us both. A little different. My God, they're going to kill us both. Which drew Jackie's attention away from the president, and she's looking John Conley eye to eye. That momentary pause set JFK up, and as she gets there, okay, and you can see the reaction to Jackie Kennedy right here. He talked about, there are 3 shots going in JFK's head almost simultaneously about this time. You talk about excellent shots, not one of them hit Jackie Kennedy, not one. Now that part has been altered. Okay? It looks like an explosion to the front of the head. There was no explosion to the front of the head. Okay? It almost looks like, my God, this whole part of his head is blown out. But when you get to the autopsy, the head is intact. But then wait till you see what happens with all of the different pictures of the autopsy. And JFK goes back and to the left. Now this is what J. Edgar Hoover did. J. Edgar Hoover got a hold of this film, and he reversed this frame with the frame in front. So when you see the frame in front, instead of seeing back and to the left, you see forward. His head went forward. So it made it look like the shots were coming from behind. And he goes, yeah, he says, we made a mistake. But it's already out there. The national news media has it. Well, why did you reverse them? Well, it was a typographical error. Crap, you got typographical errors all through this whole thing. Okay. Back to the program. After President Kennedy was removed from the hospital, a press conference was organized at 2:15 p.m. Dr. Clark, Wayne Harris from the White House staff, and Dr. Perry. Now this is down in Parkland, and the president is en route to Love Field to be put on Air Force One. There were 2 wounds. This is what Dr. Clark said. There were 2 wounds. A small entrance wound below the Adam's apple. Entrance wound. It struck him at about the necktie knot. It entered the neck in front and entered the chest cavity. Chest cavity. Front, chest cavity. Okay? The president was facing the assassin when he was shot in the throat. That's what Dr. Clark stated. Dr. Perry stated, there was an entrance wound in the neck. It appeared to be coming at him. The wound was in the front of the throat. Dr. Clark continued. The second wound, an exit wound, a large avulsive wound, was on the right posterior cranium. President Kennedy's body has just been removed from Parkland. Presidential Press Secretary Malcolm Kilduff, along with Dr. Clark and Dr. Perry, have just described to the world the wounds that caused the death of President Kennedy. Oh, but we got to go to the official site, and that's Bethesda. There never was any evidence of a single bullet or magic bullet in Dallas. Malcolm Kilduff, press secretary, entrance, just above the right eye. Entrance. Dr. Robert McClellan, the surgeon at Parkland, says exit wound, right occipital lobe. In fact, there was ample proof of multiple gunshots and multiple shooters, with most shots coming from in front of JFK in Dealey Plaza. The Kennedy casket shuffle from Parkland to Air Force One to Bethesda. His body, sheeted body, the casket, back to a sheeted body, to a body bag, to a silver and probably shipping casket, back to the body with the sheet, back to the naked body of JFK, back to a sheet, and back to the ornate casket from Dallas. Military orders, secrecy, deception, cover-up. Now, a lot of people will sit back and say, you know, our government would never do anything like this. Well, then who did it? You tell me who did it. Castro? Cuba? Soviet Union? Soviet Union come over and do this stuff? Were they in charge of the body? Who's in charge of the body, guys? God dang. You know, but most of us, as we're growing up, we believe in God, we believe in the flag, we believe that the United States is this whole thing. It took me 25 years to even think that Lyndon Johnson had something to do with it. But after that 25 years, all I had to do was go to Dallas. All I had to do was ask the people in Dallas, well, who do you guys think killed him? Johnson! One of the most corrupt presidents in the history of the United States. Democrat. Then we have Bush, Republican, but we don't want to go there. And you know what? It's really not about Republicans and Democrats, it's just about power. It's about power and who controls the power. And I firmly believe today that I don't really believe there's a difference between Democrats and Republicans at the presidential part of the United States. I may have to change my mind after this next year, but we're going to wait and see. I believe this was a domestic coup d'etat, a national security state cover-up. Why? Okay, so now you attendees understand that the context within we are evaluating the Air Force One tapes and other critical data, we can now proceed to of our examination of the initial tug of war over the autopsy site. and the mode of transportation for JFK's body en route to the autopsy. Something was very much amiss that day. It behooves us to understand what was going on. So when and where was JFK's body removed from the Dallas casket, and why? The Secret Service was intent upon preventing a Texas autopsy. They were under orders from the White House. The Secret Service could not, under any circumstance, allow an honest autopsy of President Kennedy's remains. An honest autopsy would have revealed that he was shot from the front, the right front, and from behind, and was a victim of crossfire and therefore a conspiracy. Can't have it. The objective of the Secret Service in the immediate aftermath of the assassination was to spirit the body of President Kennedy to a designated site where the crime scene of the body could be sanitized. It was not going to be at Parkland, and it was not going to be Dr. Rose who was going to do the autopsy. Hence, we now know why there was an extended altercation at Parkland Hospital with Dr. Rose and law enforcement officers over the custody of the body. It was necessary to remove all evidence of frontal shots prior to the autopsy so that the autopsy results would conform with the official cover story or legend, namely that JFK had been shot by a lone gunman firing from above and behind him in the Texas School Book Depository, as Cliff, as you pointed out. Why? Under orders. Now, I'm going to show you this. How many of you have seen this photograph of JFK up here? Have you seen that?
Yeah.
Okay. That's not what the bullets did in Dallas. That's what the doctors did. This is what the autopsy doctors did. That's what's coming out of the 4 million documents released in 1992. You want to see smoking guns? They're coming up. Orders from the White House Situation Room. Given the intense and prolonged nature of the altercation between Dr. Earl Rose and Roy Kellerman and his men at Parkland, JFK's body was removed from the Dallas casket immediately after it was taken aboard Air Force One as a security precaution on orders from the White House Situation Room, in case Dr. Rose and law enforcement arrived unannounced to take custody of President Kennedy's remains. This possibility must have seemed very real to Roy Kellerman and his Secret Service compatriots. The altercation at Parkland and had been intense and nearly required physical violence for its resolution. There is no other logical or rational reason for the removal of JFK's body from the Dallas casket after it was taken aboard Air Force One. This is the only reasonable explanation. This was the beginning of the medical cover-up of JFK's assassination. Please note, there are a number of explanations regarding the removal of President Kennedy's body and transportation of it to Bethesda. I will be sourcing Doug Horn's account as his research from the ARRB, Assassination Record Review Board, seems to indicate this scenario. Managing the post-mortem surgery of President Kennedy. Orders from the White House. The White House Situation Room, November 22nd, 1963. These two men were directing the orders that managed the illicit post-mortem surgery. Gerald Bain and McGeorge Bundy, of the he's JFK's National Security Agency advisor. JFK's body was removed from the Dallas casket immediately after it was taken aboard Air Force One as a security precaution on orders from the White House Situation Room. On orders from the White House, codename Crown. White House, Crown. Crown to Air Force One, codenamed Air Force One, Angel. The Dallas bronze ceremonial casket carrying the body of the president is open. Okay? Bronze ceremonial casket. JFK's in it. It's open. When was it open? We're going to show you when it was open. JFK's body is taken out. It almost sounds sacrilegious, doesn't it? I mean, what the hell are you doing taking the body out? Okay? Secret Service agent removed JFK's body and placed it on the floor in the back aft galley of Air Force One, awaiting further orders. JFK's body moved to the aft galley. After removing the body of JFK, a Secret Service agent placed JFK in a body bag and placed the body bag in the aft galley on the floor near the exit of the plane on the starboard side. There are two sides of an airplane, two sides of a ship, for the most part. The starboard side is the right side, but we're looking at the left side, which is the port side. Okay? The starboard side we never see, but there's a door over there on that side. At 2:33 p.m., President Johnson orders all personnel to come up front to witness his oath of office. They are waiting on Mrs. Kennedy, and he wants all Secret Service personnel to push forward. You got to see me. You got to see me take the oath of office. At 2:36 p.m., they're still waiting on Mrs. Kennedy. At 2:38 p.m., President Johnson takes the oath of office. While he was taking the oath of office, which is a diversion, the oath is a diversion so that the Secret Service can remove President Kennedy's body, which has been placed in a black body bag, to the forward aft of Air Force One, and then it would be moved just behind the cockpit of the pilot. So in order to do that, you have the Dallas casket has been opened. It's now empty. The sheet draped President's body is moved to the back aft and placed in a body bag. While Johnson is taking the oath of office, out the starboard side of the back of the plane, the Secret Service agents carry the black body bag of President Kennedy down this ramp while Johnson is taking the oath of office. Oh, I mean, boy, did we make a big deal of this? And he wanted Mrs. Kennedy there to take the oath of office. It's a diversion. Actually, he didn't need to take the oath of office.
He was already president.
Automatically president. But he had to do that. And he also put it in the face of Robert Kennedy, who gave him the oath of office. Remember? Judge Sarah T. Hughes, whom Robert Kennedy said, no, she's not going to be a federal judge. Well, guess what she becomes right then and there? A federal judge. He puts it right in the face of Robert Kennedy. Almost like saying, F you. Now, I'm pretty sure he might have said that. JFK's body is moved to the forward aft galley. The casket is now empty. And the forward aft galley is just below the pilot's cockpit. The baggage and storage area in the forward aft of Air Force One is air conditioned and pressurized. It is the perfect place to store and hide the President's body during the flight from Dallas back to Andrews Air Force Base. Air Force One arrives at Andrews Air Force Base. A Marine helicopter rolled to a stop at the front of Air Force One on the starboard side, near the forward, aft, and baggage area. Secret Service agents offload the body bag of President Kennedy and place it on board of this helicopter en route to Bethesda. Part 2. Secret Service, led by Secret Service Agent Kellerman and Secret Service Agent Greer, offload the empty Dallas casket and place it in a light gray naval cardiac ambulance. This is what the world witnessed. Tears, mind you, tears and shock. However, the bronze casket is empty. This is what we see. Again, the bronze casket is empty. We see a bronze casket put into a gray naval cardiac ambulance. The casket is empty. Jackie Kennedy reaches for the door handle on the gray naval cardiac ambulance, believing that JFK is already aboard. She steps into the naval ambulance with Robert Kennedy for the journey to Bethesda. At this point in time, she believes she was instrumental in the decision-making process to move her husband to the Naval Hospital in Bethesda for a military autopsy. The casket in the ambulance is in the ambulance. JFK is not in the casket. Jackie does not know this. Okay? Isn't this amazing? And I tell you what, it took me years to go through this because I'm sitting there going, oh my God, how does it? I said, I can't even tell people this. But this is what's coming out of the archives, guys. And I'm sitting there going, I finally have it, but how do you explain it? Okay? Oh, I've got to go back. here. Here's the explanation. Sidebar. Let's go to a sidebar. Didn't we have that during the O.J. Simpson trial? Something like that? Okay. The Gray Naval Cardiac Ambulance. This Gray Naval Cardiac Ambulance was specifically sent to Andrews Air Force Base on the night of November 22nd, 1963, not to carry the dead body of President Kennedy. It's a cardiac ambulance. It was sent by Captain Canada from Bethesda for President Johnson. Captain Canada was Vice President Johnson's cardiac doctor. Captain Canada treated Johnson for heart attacks. This ambulance was sent as a precautionary vehicle for the new president. It came equipped with a driver, a doctor, a nurse, and a medical corpsman. If you watch the films enough, you'll see the medical corpsman jump out the back, because the Secret Service is going to commandeer this whole thing and take the hearse. Okay? Kellerman was given orders by the White House to stay with the body of JFK. Code name Lancer. Lancer is JFK's code name. He was supposed to ride the Marine helicopter to Bethesda. The orders were rescinded as he stays with the empty Dallas bronze ceremonial casket to give Jackie Kennedy, whose code name was Lace, a false assurance that the body of JFK was in the Dallas casket. Okay? The Bethesda charade and autopsy chart, or the Pentagon's three-ring circus. The games begin. 2 caskets. Here we go. Shell game. Now you see it. Now you don't. Which one is it? Well, JFK's not in this one. We already know he's not there. Well, in order to prove that, we have to prove that he came into this thing and is going to be in the autopsy room, while this one drives up to the front and offloads Jackie Kennedy. Oh, God. And I'm sitting there going, and I'm trying to go through this and read this. I'm going, what am I reading? So, here comes the shell game. Okay? This is empty. This isn't even here yet. It's going to be here, though. Okay? We now know that a U.S. Marine helicopter from Andrews with unnamed escorts on board, presumably Secret Service agents, arrived at about 6:30 p.m. in the Bethesda Officers Club parking lot. There's the back entrance to Bethesda. There's the helicopter. This is the officers' parking lot. That's where the helicopter lands. 6:30 p.m. A U.S. Marine S-58 H-34 helicopter. We know this helicopter from Andrews arrived at about 6:25 p.m. in the Officers Club parking lot and was met by a black mortuary-style hearse ordered by the Secret Service from Galler's funeral home. So Galler sends a black mortuary hearse. The White House Secret Service inside the Situation Room ordered a black mortuary-style ambulance to wait in the officers' parking lot just behind Bethesda Naval Hospital, 18:25 military time, 6:25 p.m. A U.S. Marine helicopter lands and offloads a body bag containing President Kennedy from Air Force One. Joseph Hagan and Thomas Robinson drove the black hearse. We know this helicopter from Andrews with unnamed escorts on board, presumably Secret Service agents, arrived at about 6:25 p.m. in the Officers Club parking lot, and that the body of the assassinated Commander-in-Chief was then encased inside a body bag, and that the body bag was then placed inside a plain, unadorned, lightweight, aluminum shipping casket. No longer here, now it's here. It's in this casket, okay? Placed aboard the hearse, okay? You follow me so far? Okay. And it was taken to the morgue loading dock where it arrived at 6:35 p.m. It was offloaded by HM1 Dennis David's working party. The hearse, the black Cadillac mortuary hearse, and the shipping casket were undoubtedly provided by Galler's funeral home. Joseph Hagan and the embalmer, Thomas Robinson, drove the black hearse to the rear of Bethesda Morgue. Something not mentioned was how radioactive any and all questions about the president's casket or the time of the arrival at Bethesda seemed to Joseph Hagan of Galler's. When he was interviewed by the ARB in 1996, he would not speak to the ARB voluntarily without a subpoena, and so he received one. He was evasive and non-credible about all questions related to Galler's hearse. His arrival time that night at Bethesda and the types of caskets he saw at the morgue. However, he did verify that it was his handwriting on Galler's business documents called for the first call sheet in which he wrote the following words. The body removed from metal shipping casket at United States Naval Hospital at Bethesda. Hagan spent most of his time watching the autopsy from the morgue bleachers. He stated, all of this was open in the back, in reference to the back of JFK's head. Bethesda Naval Hospital, rear entrance. First casket entry. And you think it's the... This is what we see. We see this casket, 703. Okay? That's the casket we see. Jackie Kennedy's in the vehicle. It's not even there yet. It's en route. First casket entry is this casket. Okay? Time 6:35 p.m. Military time, loading dock, rear entrance. Dennis David said that JFK's body, Lancer, was brought to Bethesda Morgue in a black mortuary hearse. The black mortuary hearse was carrying a pinkish-gray shipping casket. At 6:35 p.m., the casket delivered was a cheap aluminum shipping casket. Mode of delivery was a hearse, a black Cadillac mortuary-style hearse. The hearse was offloaded by Navy Petty Officer Dennis David and his Navy working party of about 8 sailors wearing Navy working uniforms, not dress uniforms. Understand that, not dress uniforms, because there is going to be dress uniform personnel who are going to be the color guard to protect the president. Okay? They're not there yet. Supporting evidence, David's recollection to newspapers in 1975 and to David Lifton in 1979 and 1980, and the subsequent recollections of Donald Rubenstich, a member of the Working Party in 1981. The time of the casket entry is 1835 hours or 6:35 p.m. was reported contemporaneously by United States military Sergeant Boyajan in his 1126, November 26, 1963, typed after action report. He authenticated a copy he sent to the ARB staff in 1997 to Doug Horn. Now we got documented proof now. Okay? It came through this shipping casket came through the rear freight entrance 30 to 40 minutes before the bronze coffin arrived. It was a typical gray shipping container. I helped take it out of the hearse. We put it on a gurney and wheeled it into the morgue. We were contacted sometime later and instructed to report to the rear loading dock, and we were told to stand by to receive the president's casket and to bring it directly into the mortuary. So they take this casket, where the president's body is now in, they bring it in and put it in the morgue. Then they are told to wait about 30 to 40 minutes to bring this casket and bring it into the morgue, right next to this casket. Okay? James Messler, FBI report, recalled that the head wound was in the right side of the head behind the right ear, extending down to the center of the back of the skull. It was his impression that the president must have been shot in the head from the front. There was a real jagged cut all along the hairline, just like a can opener opened it. He does not recall seeing a flap of scalp on the right rear or the right side of the front of the president's ear. There's nothing there, he says, but in the back, that's what he sees. When you start to, now, You might ask, why didn't these guys come forward? Military orders. You are not to speak about this. For how long? At least 15 years. You want to
Military orders forever.
forever. And it's one of those things you might sit back and say, well, how could anybody cover this thing up? Orders. Military orders. Okay? Wow. They, United States Navy, had a picture of Kennedy. We, Dennis David and Lieutenant Commander William Pitzer, saw a little hole about here in the temple. That's what Dennis David says, and that's what Lieutenant Commander Pitzer says. Wow. Can you say where the bullet entered his head? Kilduff replied. It is my understanding that it entered the temple in the right temple. Corroborating evidence from Parkland and Bethesda? Wow, this would be nice in a court of law. Oh, but wait a minute. We're not going to have a court case in JFK. You do know that, right? We had a commission, a blue ribbon commission, called the Warren Commission. President Kennedy was in the pinkish gray metal shipping casket. Later on during the night of the autopsy, and after the autopsy had concluded, in response to a question from Dennis David to Dr. Thornton Boswell, one of the 3 pathologists who conducted JFK's autopsy, confirmed to David that JFK, Lancer, had indeed been in the shipping casket his working party had unloaded from the hearse at the morgue's loading dock hours earlier. Military orders and cover-up. Orders and chain of command. Doug Horn, 2014, said, JFK's assassination materials released from the National Archives, JFK Records Collection, 1992. United States Navy, under orders from the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Doug Horn clarified what happened at Bethesda between the time the body arrived at 6:35 p.m. and the time of the second Dallas casket entry at 8 p.m., which is the 3rd entry. An initial inspection of the body of JFK was performed by Humes, Boswell, Ebersol, Canada, and Admirals Galloway and Kenny, said Horn. Military orders and cover-up. Orders, chain of command. Commander Humes and Boswell were given their orders through Admirals Galloway and Kenny, and they complied. What were their orders? Humes and Boswell were ordered to remove all evidence of frontal shots to the head of JFK, including the skull entry wounds and bullets and bullet fragments, and any brain tissue that showed obvious bullet tracks. In order to do so, a modified craniotomy had to be performed. There's your smoking gun, guys. We were ordered to do this. Commander Humes and Commander Boswell saw these wounds on the head of President Kennedy. They removed all evidence of frontal shots to his head, including bullet hole in his right temple. Military orders and cover-up. Parkland to Bethesda, and that's what we have for the murder of JFK. This did not happen by bullets. This was done illicit post-mortem surgery. This is the smoking gun. I have people sit back and say, there's no smoking gun. Really? The doctors finally came forward and said, well, we were under orders to do what? Remove all shots fired from the front right front. Excuse me? Maybe the Warren Commission people are right. Maybe they should go to Dallas to see if it was possible for Oswald to shoot from the front, run down all those 6 flights of stairs, and come in the front and shoot him, and then go on top of the bridge and shoot him from there too. Shit, I think that's possible. Don't you guys think that's possible?
He Gonzalez, he wasn't.
I know. Let's just say we did, and okay, well, Kennedy's neck wound on Friday, November 22nd at Parkland is a small puncture wound. By the time it gets to Bethesda, it's a 2.5-inch wound. Now, when I was in the military, I could perform a cricothyroidotomy, and it was a small slit. And you take an endotracheal tube and you stick it through the neck to aspirate the lungs. This, like somebody's slitting his throat. Captain John Ebersol. To the best of my recollection, when the body was removed from the container, pinkish gray shipping casket, there was a horrible gaping wound in the back of his head. The front of the body, except for the small hole above the right eye and the forehead, was intact. The whole front of the forehead is intact. The back of his head was blown off. This is at Bethesda. You don't see this anymore. These guys are finally coming forward. They're not under military gag orders anymore. In order to get to the second casket entry, oh, I'm going to lose you on this one. I know I am. In order to get to the second casket entry, which is the first bronze ceremonial casket entry, first casket, casket coming in. Now this is going to come back over here so that they can bring this in and put it next to the casket in the Dallas morgue. And you're going to see why. I know it sounds like, my God, what are you doing here? Why do you have to do this? Okay?
Should have to be everything museum in bronze.
It doesn't make sense.
You'll see what it makes sense. Oh God. When I started to put this together, I'm going, God, this doesn't make any sense. I don't put this together. Okay. In order to understand the second casket entry, which is the first bronze ceremonial casket entry, you follow me so far? Okay. The time is 7:17 or 1917 military time. The loading dock rear entrance at Bethesda morgue. We have to return to the front entrance of Bethesda Naval Hospital at 7:03 p.m. because that's when the historical entrance of the gray naval ambulance is coming in with the ceremonial casket. Okay, driven by Secret Agents Greer and Secret Agents Kellerman. The front entrance of Bethesda Naval Hospital. Okay, you can see in this vehicle, you can see Admiral Berkeley is sitting on the lap of Secret Service Agent Kellerman, and Secret Agent Greer is the driver. The casket is the number one casket, is empty. JFK is already in the Bethesda morgue. Offloading key personnel at Bethesda from the Gray Naval Cardiac Ambulance, Kellerman, Greer, Berkeley, Robert Kennedy, and Mrs. Kennedy. The casket is empty. Admiral Galloway seizes control of the Gray Naval Cardiac Ambulance from the Secret Service agent Kellerman and Greer and drives the ambulance with the empty casket to the rear entrance of the Bethesda morgue from 7:06 p.m. to about, we're going to see what the time is here. Okay, as Galloway seizes control, following Admiral Galloway is the 9-man team of JFK's Honor Guard in the military pickup truck. Okay? The Honor Guard is right behind this casket, which we now know is empty, and Galloway is driving it. Okay?
Admirals don't drive.
Yes, they don't. You're right.
They can, you get above the line, control, you don't drive.
Good point. Admiral Galloway accelerates and leads the casket team on a wild goose chase through the back roads of Bethesda. He loses the JFK Honor Guard on orders and returns the empty casket and ambulance to the rear entrance of the Bethesda morgue. Does this sound like a Keystone Cop comedy? Yeah. And it almost, you sit back and say, oh, well, that never happened. It did happen. That's what's coming out of the archives. That's what's so hard to put into a PowerPoint program, and I'm sitting there going, God, I'm going to lose everybody on this. Oh, my God. Okay? The second casket entry, which is the first Dallas ceremonial casket entry, the time is 7:17 or 1917 military time. Loading dock. Okay? Admiral Galloway knows the casket is empty because he and Admiral Kenny gave orders to Humes and Boswell to remove all evidence of frontal shots from the body of JFK delivered in the pinkish gray metal shipping casket at 6:35 p.m. Whew. He drives and parks the Gray Naval Cardiac Ambulance in the rear loading dock of Bethesda. Here we go. Second casket entry is an empty casket. Okay? So you can visually see this. This casket has already been offloaded with JFK, and he's in and put in the Dallas morgue, or the Bethesda morgue. This casket is driven back there and it's empty. So they're going to take this casket and move it into the morgue, but it's empty. Okay, yes?
So let me get this straight. At 7:05, right? He drops off Jackie Kennedy and Robert Kennedy
Right,
in the front,
right.
and the casket doesn't get out. He takes the card, goes, America's done his criminal on everybody, and
You got it. You know, when I started reading this, I started laughing. I'm thinking, what am I reading here? I said, I'm having a rough time trying to explain the assassination of JFK. Now I got to explain this thing here. And I'm going, oh my God. But when it starts coming out of the National Archives, I'm going, oh my gosh, I have documents to prove this. Oh, jeez. Okay, here we go. The second casket entry is an empty casket. The casket was delivered in a bronze. The casket delivered was a bronze ceremonial viewing casket furnished by the O'Neill Funeral Home in Parkland Hospital in Dallas. It was taken into the morgue anteroom by 4 federal agents using a wheeled conveyance like a church truck to wheel the coffin in. FBI agents James Siebert, Frank O'Neill, and Secret Service agents Roy Kellerman and William Greer move the coffin in. Okay, here we go. It is an empty casket. The FBI does not know that it's empty. The Secret Service knows. They are running the show. Okay? You follow so far? Okay, now, if we now know that the Secret Service is running the show because they're getting orders from the White House, would you like to go back to Dallas and find out who's running the show as they move President Kennedy in position to get shot? Guys, this was a staged event. There were shooters all over Dealey Plaza. There wasn't some lone stupid gunman up on the 6th floor. This was planned. This was a military-style hit. And here's the thing. I've often asked myself, I go, God dang, you got all these Cuban people that are pissed at JFK. You got the CIA that's pissed at JFK. Why would you put those guys behind the gun? You wouldn't. You'd put professional assassins behind it. And where would you get professional assassins? You probably get them from the military, but then the CIA probably got them from Europe. Because we do have the arrest of several people who are down there that are private contractors that are flown out of the United States on military hops and flown back to NATO. Oh God, guys. Here, I'll just give you a little hint where I'm going to go next time we do this. General Lemnitzer is the Joint Chiefs of Staff chairman. He's fired by JFK, and we'll tell you those reasons later. But JFK can't fire him because he's a World War II veteran. You don't fire World War II veterans. So he says, no, hell, you're not going to go here, so we'll put you in NATO. Back where it was founded by Eisenhower, Churchill, and the people who ran it, Allen Dulles and Hyman Lemnitzer. Lemnitzer and Dulles worked hand-in-hand in assassinations during World War II. You get a hint? You need to see the next lecture. It will blow your mind. Okay? That's how deep this is. Oswald didn't do this. Oswald's a patsy, like he said he was. He didn't know what the hell was going on. He was following orders. In fact, well, I can't even tell you that now. I won't. God, we're already lost with casket number 2. Okay? All right. Military orders to cover up. Orders, orders, orders. JFK is now back in the casket. Well, how did he get back in the casket? Well, afterwards, somewhere between 7:40 and 7:45 p.m., JFK's body was placed back into the Dallas casket, and it was allowed to be found by the Joint Casket Service Team, so they could perform their ceremonial function and take the Dallas casket into the morgue. And when you start reading about this, you're sitting there going, why are they doing this? Because they're following orders. And they will come out and say, we brought the casket in. Well, we didn't see anybody else, but well, we did lose the casket about halfway around. Where did it go? I don't know. But we come back and it's sitting right there. Okay. And as they take the Dallas casket into the morgue, you're prepared for the third coming. sounds like Jesus Christ coming back. Okay. A covert military operation and obstruction of justice. Third casket entry. Time is 8 p.m. or 2000 hours military time. JFK is back in the Dallas ceremonial casket, which is the second entry of the Dallas casket at 8 p.m. Allowed the honor guard to carry JFK's body and his cranial wounds, unknown to them, now altered and dramatically indifferent appearance, into the morgue, which was their primary function that night. After earlier losing the casket while chasing a decoy ambulance around the grounds of Bethesda in darkness, it was imperative to those orchestrating the cover-up that night that the confused and mortified Joint Service Casket Team be allowed to find the casket shortly before 8 p.m. and perform their duty authorized function. Here, no more. Here, inside, kept inside. This comes in, nobody's in it. They take it in, the 2 Secret Service agents and the FBI, because that's documented, we can document that, and they set it right next to a casket, this casket here. After the President's body has had this alteration, then these doctors and Secret Service agents put it back inside here. And they wheel it out, okay, put it back in the naval ambulance, and then these guys drive up and say, oh my God, there it is. Let's get it in. Let's move it in. So now this is coming back in with the President's body. This is sitting in the Dallas morgue empty. It's in the National Archives, guys. The 8 p.m. casket delivered was the same bronze ceremonial viewing casket from Dallas that had entered earlier with no one inside it at 7:17. It was taken into the morgue again at 8 p.m. This time with JFK's body having first been reintroduced into the casket by the Joint Service Casket Team, or Honor Guard, composed of U.S. Navy, U.S. Army, U.S. Air Force, U.S. Coast Guard personnel wearing dress uniforms with white gloves. Supporting evidence, the written report of the Military District of Washington provided the time of 2000 hours, and extensive interviews by authors David Lifton and William Manchester established that the unique nature of the ceremonial second entry for the Dallas casket. We now know from the new evidence revealed in Inside the AARB, the 2 witnesses, Tom Robinson of Goller's Funeral Home and Navy enlisted X-ray technician Earl Reed, both witnessed the illicit clandestine postmortem surgery to President Kennedy's cranium. Surgery whose goal was to sanitize the crime scene by removing all evidence of frontal shots and right frontal shots from the body by Commanders Humes and Commander Boswell, well before the official autopsy began at 8 p.m. Medical technicians at Bethesda, Paul O'Connor and James Jenkins. I've had the opportunity to talk with these guys over the years. Paul O'Connor is now deceased. James Jenkins is still alive. And David, I know you've got the opportunity to talk to him over the years. But when John Kennedy was assassinated November 22nd, 1963, his body was taken to Bethesda. Along with fellow student Paul O'Connor and James Jenkins, was asked to assist Dr. Humes and Dr. Thornton Boswell and Dr. Pierre Fink in the autopsy of Kennedy. Jenkins recalled that at the time Dr. Hughes removed the brain, it was not necessary for Hughes to resect the spinal cord in order to remove the brain. Are you kidding me? The brain was already cut. All of the ligaments, all the tissues and the spinal cord were cut. All he had to do was lift it out. And he's witnessing this saying, how the hell does that happen? We're removing the brain, but it's already cut loose. Well, who did that? Well, he's not going to ask questions because he's military. He's not going to ask the commander. Excuse me. Now, my problem is I would ask the commander. Well, my problem is I'd never be there. And I probably wouldn't be here now. The spinal cord had already been completely severed, not torn, by incisions on each side in different planes. Not airplanes, but planes. Don't really get to that. Jenkins stated that after Dr. Boswell put the brain upside down in a sling in a formalin bucket, he noticed that both carotid arteries at the core, at the circle of Willis, leading into the brain were retracted, which made it very difficult to insert needles for infusion. Jenkins interpreted this retraction as meaning that the carotids had been cut sometime before the autopsy. When asked how he interpreted all of this data about the condition of the brain, Jenkins said that he had concluded that the brain had already been removed before the autopsy began. In response to a question as to why this might have occurred, he stated quite clearly that the purpose would have been to remove bullet fragments. Bethesda Naval Hospital. At one point, during President Kennedy's official autopsy, time 8:15, pungent cigar smoke could be smelled within the morgue at Bethesda Naval Hospital. And the chief pathologist, Dr. Humes, ordered his young assistant, Paul O'Connor, to tell whoever was smoking to cease and desist. O'Connor approached the bleachers, the morgue gallery, and immediately noticed that the miscreant who dared smoke inside the morgue during the president's autopsy was 4-star General Curtis LeMay, the Air Force Chief of Staff and member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Bethesda, General May arrived at National Airport at 5:12 p.m. and given plenty of time to get to Bethesda Naval Hospital prior to arrival of JFK's body at 6:35 p.m. When the nervous young Paul O'Connor approached the intimidating beetle-browed, bejowled Curtis LeMay and was about to make his request, he consistently recounted over the years that LeMay leaned forward and silently but contemptuously blew cigar smoke in his face. Because of the meticulous scientific work done by David Mantic and Doug Horn, we now know that the series of skulls and x-rays and photographs taken of President Kennedy's cranium prior to 8 p.m. when the autopsy began represent damage caused by the illicit postmortem surgery, not by any assassin bullet. Based on what we know about the autopsy report today, it would not be admitted into evidence at a trial, since the first two written versions as well as the original autopsy notes have been destroyed. Each individual autopsy photograph and skull x-ray would be subjected to significant challenges before they could be admitted into evidence. The 3 surviving skull x-rays would not be admitted into evidence at any trial today, for we now know, thanks to the pioneering work of Dr. David Mantic, that the 3 skull x-rays in the archives are not originals, but they are altered copies films. We know today that the brain photographs in the National Archives that reside with the JFK autopsy photographs can now be the photographs of President Kennedy's brain. They have been disowned by the official photographer, John Stringer, because they are recorded on the wrong types of film, and by one of the FBI agents present at the autopsy, Frank O'Neill, because there was too much mass present in the wrong location. Furthermore, the large amounts of mass present in these brain photographs is grossly inconsistent, not only with the skull x-rays, which now show much of the brain tissue missing in the forebrain and in the right cerebral hemisphere, but also with the amount missing mass noted at Parkland Hospital. At least 1/3 of the brain was observed to be missing by Dr. Robert McClellan, where President Kennedy received emergency treatment in an attempt to save his life. Chief Petty Officer Sandra Spencer, the day after the assassination of President Kennedy, Sandra Spencer was informed by her boss, Robert Knudsen, that Secret Service agent Fox would be arriving to have some film negatives to be developed. When the agent arrived, he said his name was James K. Fox. Spencer developed the films and discovered they were color photographs of Kennedy's corpse. It took Sandra Spencer just over an hour to develop the dry prints. Fox gathered up the negative prints and told her to forget that he had ever been there. Thursday, June 5th, 1979, her deposition before the AARA, Sandra Spencer developed the films, discovered that they were color photographs of Kennedy's corpse. This is what she saw. Bullet wound in his right, above his right eye, bullet wound in his neck, and the back of his head was blasted out. All the wounds that the doctors at Parkland said. Conclusion. So in tying these loose ends into one neat package, this is what we now know and is supported by documents coming out of the National Archives. Ordered, designed, executed. A covert intelligence design ordered by the National Security State, designed by the Pentagon and the CIA, and executed by military intelligence, the CIA, and Secret Service, as an off-the-shelf, self-sustaining entity, standalone entity that can perform a certain job outside the law of the Constitution and cover up with a blanket of national security. To physically remove the President's body from Air Force One and prepare for illicit post-mortem surgery. To remove the body from the President's head any and all evidence of shots fired from the front and right front, so that the autopsy results would conform with the official cover story alleged, namely that JFK had been a victim of an assassination by a lone gunman, firing above and from behind him, all shots coming from the Texas School Book Depository building. The publicized television removal of the bronze casket from Air Force One about 6:10 p.m. immediately after Air Force One was on the blocks at 6:04 p.m. was a sham. For by definition, that casket had to be empty when it was offloaded, since JFK's body first arrived at Bethesda Naval Hospital 20 minutes prior to the ornate viewing coffin from Dallas. The first entry of the Dallas casket into the Bethesda morgue was an empty coffin. Documents in his book, Inside the Assassination Records Review Board, Doug Horn says that the early arrival of JFK's body in the shipping casket at 6:35 p.m. provided time for key medical personnel at Bethesda Naval Hospital to perform a preliminary inspection of his head and grossly expand the President's cranial wounds by illicit clandestine postmortem surgery in order to remove evidence of shots from the front and right front prior to the formal commencement of autopsy at 8:15 p.m. This is what the autopsy doctors did to President Kennedy's head. The bullets that were fired in Dealey Plaza did not do this. Military orders. Commander Humes and Commander Boswell were given their orders through Admirals Galloway and Kenny to remove frontal shots from the President Kennedy's head, and they complied. The second entry of the Dallas casket, 8 p.m., allowed the honor guard to carry JFK's body, the cranial wounds unknown to them, and had different appearance, back into the morgue. It was the impossibly early arrival of JFK's body in a different casket from which it left Dallas, in an aluminum shipping casket, and a different ambulance from that in which the Dallas casket left Andrews Air Force Base, namely in a hearse of black Cadillac. That broken chain of evidence. Custody of the body, and therefore by definition invalidated the results of the Bethesda autopsy. The broken chain of custody was evidence of a covert operation that was underway. In short, obstruction of justice. And right now, we are looking at an obstruction of justice right now in the Trump administration. They conspired to execute President Kennedy, ordered the cover-up of his murder, fabricated his autopsy, and marketed to America and the world and all of history. Who are they? They are the Knights of the Oval Office, the supervisors of death and murder management. The Knights of the Oval Office, they military managed the murder of President Kennedy and called the shots from the White House Situation Room. They're the guardians of our republic. The CIA killed John Kennedy, but not without permission. The Pentagon, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, ordered JFK's execution because they believed he was a traitor. Guardians of our republic. Recent National Archives documents and translation of Air Force One tapes provides reasonable doubt that the White House Situation Room was calling the shots and executing the orders from the National Security State to terminate the life of President Kennedy, to hijack his body from Air Force One, to perform illicit postmortem surgery, and to remove all bullets and bullet fragments which would indicate shots were fired from the front and right front. In the end, it became a covert military operation designed to conceal the true facts behind the murder of President Kennedy. These people who sponsored the assassination of President Kennedy had the means, motive, opportunity, and talent to make it succeed. After 12:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, LBJ was safe in the office of the presidency, safe from the illegal demons that were haunting him, because you could not kill a president one day and impeach his successor right after the funeral. The reputation of the nation, as well as the ever so precious stock exchange and banking industry, would not have survived that. So LBJ got a get out of jail free card, and it had revalidated happily every time he threw more billions of dollars in young lives into the rice paddies of Vietnam, 10,000 miles away. Thank you. Now, like to do, I'll answer questions for, I got 5 minutes, because we've got to get out of here. But here's the thing, we're going to move this over to Johnny's, and we'll get a couple tables, put them together. I know some of you can't go there, but if you would like to go to Johnny's, get a brew, and I know you have questions. Let me take a couple right now. And yes, sir.
Just one. The Zapruder film. Zapruder was an individual. He wasn't tasked by any news agency. He wasn't tasked by any government agency. He was just making a film of the presidential visit that day. Is that correct?
As far as we know, but there's some background information on Zapruder that's questionable, but for the most part, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
After the autopsy, was it an open casket after that?
It was only an open casket for Mrs. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, and they said, well, it's not going to be
But it
open.
was not public, so-
No. In fact,
A pathologist wouldn't see the body.
yeah, hundreds, in fact, you could see in some of the videotapes of hundreds of thousands of people lined to go by the president's coffin. You know, I think the feeling that I would have had at that time is to visit that. I would have done that, but, you know, I was 13 years old, now I still had basketball and girls on my mind. Well, I still have basketball on my mind. Yes?
Which versions of the Zapruder film did you see? Both of them?
Well, you know, that's a very good question. I've seen a lot of versions of the Zapruder film. The first film that I had gotten was probably a 40th generation copy, and it was pretty muddy. And then Robert Groden got a film for me, and I looked at it and I go, wow, it's very clear. There are films, and David has a copy of one of the films right now, and it's one of the most clearest films that I've ever seen. Except for there's another film on the internet, and I can't remember the guy who did it. But he stabilizes the camera itself, and then you can see the shots, slow motion go in. But that would never be admitted into a court of law because you're altering the film and slowing it down and things of this nature. And so what happens is that the military and the CIA have covered themselves by saying, well, see what you can find. And you had a question, then I'll come over there.
Whatever happened to the limousine?
Okay.
A lot of evidence there.
Wow. See, there's a murder scene in Dealey Plaza, and Dealey Plaza is the murder scene. And then you have a secondary murder scene, which is the limousine, okay? And then you have another murder scene, which is the president. And you also have Governor Connolly. So you've got at least 3 or 4 murder scenes there. Once you remove the presidential vehicle, and I tried to follow this, it supposedly went back on one of the planes, went back to, it went back to, let me see, the White House and stayed in there for a while and then ended up at Ford. And then what happened was we have a guy that came forward and said, I'm the one who's in charge of Ford Motor Company putting windshields in. And he came in and he couldn't get in his office. The Secret Service was there manning the office, and he finally got in and he saw 20 windshields, okay? And he saw the windshield that was taken out, and he said there was a bullet hole in it, and it was an entrance bullet hole. And he knew because he had worked with windshields. They took it out and broke it up. That's destruction of evidence. And then they put new windshields in and put a bullet hole in it from behind. So I'm sitting there going, God dang. And this guy, he's now deceased, but he left that on there. So, you know, it's one of those things where you just don't do research on this for 20 minutes. And I kept going. I said, my God, you keep finding things out over and over. Eddie, I think you had a question.
Yes. Alan, you know that Alan Dulles was also the chairman of the Majestic Trail Board?
Not only that, have you heard, see, he was also part of what is known as the, see if I get the name correct, the Alteration Committee. And the Alteration Committee is an inside 4-man committee inside the CIA. And I'm sitting there going, alteration, well, they decide who's going to die. And that's CIA. Now, the CIA by mandate is not supposed to operate inside the United States. So where can they legally operate? In Europe. And they put all the assassination teams together in Europe. And who put them together? Dulles and Lemnitzer. That's where my program's gonna go next time. And boy, when you see that, oh my God, you're gonna start questioning everything in history. And that, I certainly do. Yes, Ben?
Did I hear you say that Oswald wasn't on the 6th floor? And where do you think he was, and why did he shoot Tibbetts?
Okay, the evidence that we have right now is that Oswald was working on the 1st floor, the 5th floor, and he may have been on the 6th floor momentarily, but he was never on there, on that floor most of the time. That floor was being refurbished. Oswald was working on the 5th floor for the most part. The last time we see him, he's on the 5th floor. There's a couple guys rushing down the elevator, and he yells at them to send the elevator back up. Okay, and that's probably about 12 o'clock. And then we have probably about 5 or 6 eyewitnesses that has him on the 1st floor eating lunch and then going to get a Coke. As he walks by and he notices that the presidential motorcade is out there, it's starting to come around, and he supposedly goes up to the 2nd floor and gets a Coke. I talked to Robert Groden about 8 years ago, and he told me, I said, there's a story out, and he confirmed the story. He says, it's my story. He says, I met a woman who was interviewed by the Warren Commission, and the Warren Commission told her to shut your mouth. You never heard or saw any of this stuff. And she said, Oswald came up from the 1st floor, in the front of the building, not behind the building, the steps. Came up from the front, like he normally did. He was wearing a white T-shirt. Came up there, and he would normally go over to get a Coke. And he would fumble around in his pocket for change. He didn't have the right change. So she waited on him, and he came over and says, you have change for $1 so I can get a Coke. Well, she didn't have change there. She went to her purse, got change, was counting out the change, and he says, no pennies, please. And right about that time, boom, 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 shots are being fired off. And she says, what was that? He goes, I don't know. Gets the change, goes over and gets a Coke, and then is supposedly confronted by Dallas police officer Marion Baker. I've been in that area. I don't know how Baker, going up the back stairs, could see something in the front. And if this is a true story, and she was told to keep her mouth shut, because that didn't happen. She goes, well, it most certainly did. And the guys who told her to keep her mouth shut, Arlen Specter, you know who Arlen Specter is? He's now dead. Senator Specter, Pennsylvania, okay? He and David Bellin created the single bullet theory. Yeah. Mr. Single bullet theory. It doesn't exist. It never did take place. Yes, sir.
So where was the shooter was not Oswald from the back? There was a shooter from the back, or there was not one, number one? Number
Okay.
two, if there was, where were they?
All right. I go along with Doug Horn. Doug Horn believes that there was a shooter in the Daltex building, 2nd or 3rd floor. And we speculated that for a long time because of the lower trajectory. The higher trajectory at this angle, somewhere between 60 and 70 degree angle firing down at a car that's leaving, which the angle would be.
That is the book depository, or is it?
The book depository building is here, and the Daltex building is right here. So at the 2nd floor, 2nd or 3rd floor, you have a straight-on shot to the back of President Kennedy. And then we believe that there are people up there. That there are people up on the 6th floor. I think that there are people up there that are firing shots as to draw people's attention up there, and some of the bullets actually hit around. At one time, I could actually count for 13 shots. And so when you see those 13 shots, you sit back and you go, my God, how did Oswald fire 13 shots? Well, Oswald didn't fire. In fact, the weapon itself was a World War II weapon that had a broken firing pin. And in order for the FBI to fire it, they had to put shims underneath the scope. And in order to do that, it was lined for a left-handed person. And so, you sit back and you go, how does this take place? Okay? And then when Oswald supposedly shot Tippit, which I don't think he did, we now are looking at new evidence that very possibly Dallas police officers shot Officer Tippit. And
Possibly also White.
And, well, you know, and Tippett was having an affair, and he was in the neighborhood where he was having an affair, okay? And he was about ready to divorce his wife, and he dies, and his wife immediately after that gets $1 million because of all the good, solid Americans that want to take care of this police officer's wife. Oh, man. You think she gave any
Vacation if there's a problem.
nah, not at all. But, yeah, I don't think there's any evidence at all that shows that Lee Harvey Oswald shot Officer Tippett. And once you get to that point, you sit back and you go, well, who? Well, in fact, if you go over the arrest of Lee Harvey Oswald in the Texas theater, the arrest says he was up in the balcony. Well, he wasn't up in the balcony. Well, who's in the balcony then? If you're going to put this into a court of law, the arrest says he was up in the balcony. Well, he wasn't. We found him on this floor here. So which one is it? He was arrested here or he was arrested up here? Well, we do have another guy going out the back door that looks like Oswald. We have a guy saying that there's an Oswald going out the back door under guard of the assistant district attorney. And of course, why would an assistant district attorney have a rifle and walk an Oswald to, or a fake Oswald or whoever it was? Now, we have Oswalds pop up all over the place.
Yeah, awesome.
And if you want to read a book, it's called Harvey and Lee. And that book costs $100. But that book, my God, I'll tell you what, it documents who Lee Harvey Oswald is, who Lee Oswald is, and who Harvey Oswald. There's two of them.
Yeah.
And they're both going to school in the same school. And they're 2 years apart. Now, I can throw this out at you. When I was going through that book, and I looked at my buddy Brian, and I said, let me see if I got this correct. Could it be that the real Lee Harvey Oswald set up the fake Lee Harvey Oswald for the murder of JFK? I'm telling you what, that's, you know, and I didn't even want to bring that out, but that's what's in this book, and I sit back and I go, he documented this, not through the Warren Commission documents. He went out and he went to the schools where Oswald went, and he went to the annuals, found the annuals, and then went to those people and said, did you know Lee Harvey Oswald? Yes, we did. So, guys, we got to get out of here. If we want to continue on, we'll go over to Shawnee. And thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it.